Good evening. It's now 6 o'clock, and I will call to order the November 19th, 2024 meeting of the Manhattan City Commission. When you get to your seat, will you call the roll, please?
Mayor Adamchuk,
Here.
Commissioner McCullough,
Yes.
Commissioner Opelt,
In attendance.
Commissioner Motta,
Here.
Commissioner Mitten.
Here.
Mayor, we have 5 commissioners present. The quorum of 3 is met.
Great, thank you. Will you please join me in saying the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. We have one proclamation this evening. Will Joseph Pandillo and Nathan Dixon please join me at the podium? Whereas Native Americans were the first to create thriving communities, develop agricultural practices, and establish great civilizations through the Americas, and Indigenous people have cared for and maintained reciprocal relationships with these lands, waters, plants, and animals across generations, demonstrating enduring stewardship and a deep connection to ancestral territories. And the City of Manhattan acknowledges that we are on the traditional lands of the K.S.A people who lived in this region until they were forced from Kansas on June 4th, 1873. And the city recognizes that this area has also been inhabited by diverse indigenous nations for thousands of years, whose names and histories have often been obscured. The state of Kansas is historically home to many Native nations, including but not limited to the K.S.A, Osage, and Pawnee, who utilized the lands within present-day Riley County for hunting, gathering, and trade. Whereas Native Americans have profoundly shaped the character, culture, and history of our county, state, and nation through their resilience, ingenuity, and contributions in fields such as agriculture, art, government, science, and many more. And Native Americans, Alaska Natives, and Native Hawaiians serve as vital leaders, educators, professionals, emergency responders, business owners, elected officials, and active community members enriching every facet of society. The City of Manhattan celebrates the traditions, languages, and stories of Native peoples to ensure that their histories, cultures, and contributions are honored and preserved for future generations. The City of Manhattan is committed to advancing relationships with Indigenous peoples built on respect, equity, and an understanding of historical and contemporary injustices. Therefore, I, Susan E. Adamchak, Mayor of the City of Manhattan, Kansas, do hereby proclaim November 2024 as Native American Heritage Month. Congratulations. Thank you.
Thank you. Hey, everybody. My name is Nathan. Lieutenant Riley County EMS, resident of Manhattan, taxpayer for like 30 years or something like that. Like my friend here, I was a college student back in the day, vice president of the Native American student body. I'm an example of what happens in a friendly community, one that's open to having us very receptive. This is just another example of things that will advance that relationship. But the simplest thing we can probably do to advance Native relations is just have a conversation. Have a conversation with your neighbor down the street. You'll get some interesting stories, probably find out we can do amazing things with just flour and grease. Don't have a conversation with a guy that his grandmother he's native by his great-great-grandmother who was a Cherokee Indian princess. We don't really know him. But again, thank you, and this is a wonderful thing.
Bepe Baom, Konya Joseph, Hakita Kai Goiku. Hi everyone, my name is Joseph. I'm from the Kiowa tribe of Oklahoma. People who have once been in Kansas and displaced back to Oklahoma. And it's really important that we have this proclamation here. It's not only a proclamation, it's a promise to understand histories, provide visibility, provide community. And as the president of Native American Student Body, it is really important and impactful that we have these different conversations and acknowledgements. So it means a lot. And yeah, we have a lot of good food, especially with flour and animal fat, lard. My grandma's really traditional. She'll still use animal fat. But yeah, this really means a lot. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. It's one thing to be visible. It's another thing to be welcomed and to feel that you belong in a space. And I think this not only contributes to history, but also pays homage to all of the troubling history behind Kansas, but is a promise for a better history of acknowledgement. So I appreciate it so much.
Thank you both for those inspiring words. We will open the meeting for public comment. Those wanting to make comments not related to items on the agenda can do so at this time. Members of the public who signed up in person on the list at the podium before the meeting will go first. Any other members of the public in the audience may stand and be recognized to come forward. If you haven't already signed up to speak, please sign at the list, which will be over on this desk. Please state your name and residential address and/or an organization you are representing for the record and for the listening and watching audience. Each speaker has 5 minutes, can speak only once, and must stop speaking when the timer sounds. Neither the commissioners nor staff will answer questions or debate an issue. We will take your comments under advisement. So, okay, we've got, so it looks, okay. Gary, are you general public comments?
Not on the agenda.
Right. So yes, you're the first person listed.
Good evening, commissioners, staff.
Oh, I'm sorry, Gary, excuse me, I'm having a little trouble reading people's handwritings. Scott, are you on for the general comments?
No, not general comments.
Okay, got it. All right, yes, you are, please.
Yeah, it does get confusing when there's comments on the agenda and general comments that aren't on the agenda. Good evening, commissioners and staff. My name is Gary Oles. I live at 3308 Frontier Circle. I've had an opportunity the last couple days to visit with a couple of the elected and non-elected boards, and I'm here for not an accusation, but more or less emphasis of the importance of KOMA, of which you're all aware of, the Kansas Open Meetings Act. You may be aware that Crawford County commissioners got in a little trouble because they weren't very specific on their executive sessions. And I am not saying that you're not specific on your executive sessions. I'm just reminding you as well as the public. And I have this article that I'd like to give to Ms. Jackson regarding this. Also, you might be aware that the city of Junction City got in a little trouble a while back because they were very vague, evidently, or shall I say not specific enough, like Crawford County, on explaining to the public, which evidently there's an obligation statutorily for for that to happen, when you make a motion, it's supposed to be specific enough, or at least in the minutes, it's supposed to be specific enough so that whoever's reading them understands what the purpose of the executive session was. You're probably already aware of this. I find the second and third page most interesting, involving what happened. Junction City had to go through some continuing education, I guess that's what it would be referred to as. And secondly, although it is on the agenda, I just want to remind you, as I did a few weeks ago, I think you were on the video call, you weren't actually here, Mayor, but I want to remind you, as well as the public and that are here in the listening group, that when you get to the budget amendment for 2024, please don't ask for public comments, because it's not time for public comments. Statutorily, it's time for this commission to answer objections to the budget amendment, which means there'll be people, hopefully other than me, who come up and ask those questions of the budget amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Gary. Sarah, you haven't listed your subject. Do you want to speak on the general agenda?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. The general public comment session is now closed. The next item is open commissioner comment. Karen, Commissioner McCullough, have you anything? Commissioner Oppelt?
Yeah, I'm surprised you didn't bring up Stepping Into the Prairie. I got a chance to check it out at the Discovery Center the last week,
Great,
and
isn't
it is so cool. I brought my 8-year-old son, and he didn't want to go with me, but then when it was time to leave, he didn't want to leave. So definitely go check it out. It's a really cool, immersive exhibit. It's a bit cheaper than the Museum of Art and Light, but still kind of the same type of deal. And then I also got an opportunity to attend the capital campaign kickoff for the Yuma Street Cultural Center. This is a building, you probably recognize it on Yuma Street. It's the old K.S.A. Masonic Temple, formerly also a church. I can't recall the name, but they, Black entrepreneurs of the Flint Hills and other community members are working to raise money to be able to renovate that building and turn it into an entrepreneurship hub, a cultural center, venue, just a really, really cool asset to the community. So I would really encourage all of you to go and check out their website. We have a really, really cool history of Yuma Street and the Black community that lived there. Joe Louis, Jackie Robinson, they all lived on Yuma Street at one time. So we got a lot of cool history there. Definitely go check out their website. If you have the means, please contribute. It's a really worthwhile cause.
What he said, I was able to attend both of those events, and they were indeed very, very entertaining at the Discovery Center and inspiring at the Black Entrepreneurs of the Flint Hills kickoff. I also had the opportunity to attend the ribbon cutting for No Stone Unturned at their new facility on Tuttle Creek Boulevard. It was eye-opening to see the quality of resources that we have here in Manhattan for children with challenges. And they were able to expand and introduce additional services at that facility. They continue to have dreams and plans for additional focuses in the future. Should you need that resource, please look into it. So, thank you. Okay. We are now moving on to the consent agenda. The items on the consent agenda are those of a routine and housekeeping nature, or those items which have previously been reviewed by the City Commission. A commissioner may request to have an item be moved for separate discussion and consideration immediately following the consent agenda or at a different point on the agenda if desired. Does the commission have any questions or comments regarding consent agenda items?
Did anyone else have trouble with the minutes opening? I couldn't get mine.
Yes, they were not, as of this
Available.
morning, they were still not available.
Okay. The minutes from the last meeting. So I think we would just need to remove A1 because they're not attached.
It said they wouldn't be out till this morning.
It's just, I'm like trying the link right now. Yeah, it's not populating. I'm sorry, Brenda. Well, I should have emailed you ahead of time and I thought they'd pop up real quick. So
All right,
just, I would ask that we just remove that.
anything else? Okay. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda minus item A, the minutes of the regular commission meeting held Tuesday, November 5th?
I move we approve the consent agenda as Mayor Adamczyk stated.
And a second?
Second.
Thank you. City Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Commissioner McCullough?
Yes.
Commissioner Opel?
Yes.
Commissioner Motta?
Yes.
Commissioner Minton?
Yes.
Mayor Adamczyk?
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
Mayor, if we can, we will print those minutes for you all and have you an opportunity for you all to read them at the end of the meeting, and we can approve them at the end of the meeting.
Okay, thank you. Okay. All right, no item has been removed from the agenda. Okay. All right, we will move on to a public hearing to consider amending the 2024 city budget. Do we have a staff presentation on that?
I can't see. Good evening, Mayor and City Commissioners. Let me turn off my phone real quick because my alarm goes off for my medicine. Sorry. Thank you. Tonight, we are having our budget hearing to present budget amendments, and we have 5 proposed budgeted funds to review. That's interesting. So State Statute 7929-29A allows cities to amend one or more budgeted funds prior to the end of the budget year, and notification of the 2024 budget amendment was published on November 8th. It had to be published 10 days prior to the actual public hearing tonight. And so we are reviewing the Employee Benefit Fund, Fire Pension, KPNF, Sales Tax, Special Street and Highway, and Transient Guest Tax funds. So each year, the Finance Department, along with City Administration, we review all of our budgeted funds to see if we need to do any budget amendments. And usually, we look at amending the budget for these various reasons. If we have a carryover of a beginning cash balance in excess of what we originally had anticipated and want the potential to spend that money in the current year. Any revenue exceeding expectations, and there's a potential to want to spend that money. And then if expenses are exceeding expectations, that will require additional revenue to match the excess in expenditures. And so those are the reasons why we are amending some of the budgets tonight, or requesting to amend the budgets. So the first is the Employee Benefit Fund. That particular fund had an adopted budget of $6,282,621, and we are amending, proposing to amend to $7,082,621. As of September 30th, we are at 79% of budget consumed. And just want to note that our November 2024 has 3 pay periods. In addition to this particular fund, we get property taxes in that fund as well as sales tax. And so, again, we anticipate our expenditures exceeding what we had originally budgeted, and we would need to increase that, as well as transfer in money from the sales tax fund to help cover that. And that's usually where we would cover that shortfall from. Fire pension KPNF is similar to the employee benefit fund. We had an adopted budget of 1.49 and an amended budget proposed at 1.7. We're at 73% of the budget consumed. And again, we anticipate exceeding that budget and would need to increase our budget to 1.7, and sales tax revenues would be used to offset that increase. Our sales tax fund, we carried over an excess of about $150,000 in sales tax revenue from the end of 2023 to 2024. And so that would help to be used to pay for any excess in the employee benefit fund and the KPNF fund. On the screen, you have information regarding our year-to-date sales tax revenue. 5.58 is trending similar to 2023 year-to-date and 0.8% higher than 2022. So the 2023 year-to-date sales tax revenue was 5.585, and then in 2022, 5.537. At the same time, continue to provide maximum flexibility for the budget passed would be the reason to amend this budget again to be used to offset employee benefit fund and that KPNF fund. Special street and highway, so that fund is usually funded from highway gasoline tax, and so in 2023 and 22, they had some projects that were actually bid out. However, due to economic conditions, we held off in terms of moving forward with some of those, and we have enough revenue to make sure we can pay for those projects. So those projects listed are Fremont Street as well as our traffic master plan. And because we have enough revenue and the expenditures are already forecasted, we need to move forward with amending that budget as well from 3.4 to 3.8. And then transient guest tax, we get,
Rena, can you go back to so for this particular tax, the revenues generated are projected to exceed what was budgeted, and so we're asking
to spend the money to be able to pay for those projects, yes. Transient guest tax, our budget was 3.8, and then we're proposing an amendment of 4.25 for a difference of $450,000. As of September 30th, our total expenditures were 1.7. We still have some fourth quarter items to pay out. Our outside agencies, Chamber of Commerce, transfer to general fund, parking services, reimbursement for the downtown garage. And so whatever's remaining in the fund after we do all those transfers and payments out, that's what's available and can be used at the discretion of the elected officials in concert with conversation with city administration. That's all. In terms of the presentation, I stand for any questions before we open up the public hearing.
Yes, as you know, I've got questions on
Yes.
this. We discussed at the audit meeting, and really it comes down to the questions I've been asked is the differences in these beginning balances. Was that taken into consideration at the time that we did the 25 budget, because that was later in the year, so they were kind of built into what we did? Or are these kind of, or did we base it on the old assumption of what the budget was, in which case their question is, do you have like extra money or whatever?
So, for example, the sales tax fund, and I know in the memo, and let me bring that up as well, that we said that we had anticipated, I think, $850,000 as our carryover, and however, we brought in a little bit over $1 million. And so, let me bring up that actual memo. So that additional $150,000 was factored in when we planned the 2025 budget. Yes, and the same thing would have been if we had any carryover for transient guest tax, special street and highway as well.
Okay, so when we did those budgets, we knew what those numbers were, so they were built into our assumptions on it. But this is something we're doing now as we approach year end. We've got the rest of the figures for the rest of the months to kind of make those final adjustments before we close out the year.
Right,
Would that be
so-
correct?
Like for the Employee Benefit Fund and KPNF and all of the budgeted funds, you can't end the year with negative balances. So we have to make sure that those funds are shored up. And again, back to Employee Benefit Fund and the KPNF fund, those funds are funded with property taxes as well as sales tax. Our property taxes came in at 97%. You add in the motor vehicle valuation taxes, it was about 98%, so they're already running out of delinquency in terms of revenue. And so then our sales taxes are flat, and that contributes to what we are able to transfer into those particular funds as well. So, and our expenses have increased in those funds this past year due to just increase in staff and as well as our benefits and things of that nature in those two particular funds.
So, okay, thanks.
Yes, sir. Are there any other questions? Thank you.
Is there a comment from the public on this item? Mhm. Oh, do I need to open? Got it, I'm sorry. We will now open a public hearing on the budget amendments. Is there anyone who would like to? Do we need a motion? Do we need? Okay. We're opening the meeting for public comments on the budget amendment. Is there anyone who would like to make comments on this agenda item? Please approach the podium. Have you signed in previously, sir?
I don't know if this is the right time to do this. My name's Anthony Tyrock. I live at 1000 Briarwood Drive here in Manhattan. This budget that we're trying to amend here, I'm not really in favor of because everything that we seem to be doing here, we should have been planning for previously. I don't think we did a very good job in planning for it because, you know, employee benefits and fire pensions and stuff, I think those things can kind of be projected out over the years based off the prior years, right? I think that all these other things that we're talking about are concerning, you know, because, you know, we had street developments throughout the year. Fort Riley Boulevard was a disaster. It's been patched and it's not very good at all. Anderson's taken a lot longer, and I understand prices of materials go up yearly, and we've been in a very unstable financial status for a number of years now, so it's kind of hard to get through all that. But the reason I'm not in favor of it is because I think there should be other avenues other than raising our taxes to get to the $2 million again, because I pay a lot of taxes on my house, pay a lot of taxes on my cars, pay a lot of taxes in gas, and now we're going to try to do it again for $2 more million. And that's really about all I have to say on this.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to make a comment on this item?
Good evening again. My name is Gary Oles. I live at 3308 Frontier Circle. I just want to once again clarify, this is not a public comments. This is a hearing and an answering of objections. This gentleman object. Okay, I'm objecting. Well, what are we objecting to? Well, the most difficult part of this is understanding it all because it's finance and it's not like shooting a free throw, right? It's a little tougher. All right. For those here in the room and those watching online, I want to give a 3-year history of city budget amendments. Today, the Commission is considering amending the 2024 budget of $2.058 million. In 2023, they amended the budget by $3.796 million, and in 2022 by $1.2575 million. That's $7.1 million more in additional authorized spending. Doesn't mean you're going to spend it, I understand that, but you're authorizing, which basically I assume means the forecast or modeling, as the gentleman's brought up, for revenue was underestimated, and thus more was assessed than needed in ad valorem property taxes in only two funds. That's the two funds that are first listed, the employee benefit and the fire pension. Okay, not the other three. I'm not talking about those. In these 5 funds that are listed, where is the money coming from? That's my first objection. Where is the money coming from? I'd like that answer. I think the answer is sales tax revenue. Do I get an answer? It's not comments. I'm asking an objection.
I can answer the.
It was in the presentation that they would come out of sales tax.
Thank you. We really don't know, but now we know because it was in the presentation. After reviewing the 2024 budget book, which I'd recommend you all look that through, not you all, but the public, I found that our city commission passed ordinance number 3965. Anybody remember that? Maybe Karen and I do, and a few others in the room. 42 years ago. Thank you. This came about in 1982 when citizens voted to increase sales tax by 0.5%. The 0.5% specifically to create a sales tax transfer fund that you see up there, which would be expressly used to reduce the property tax requirement of other levied funds. That's those two funds we're talking about, pension funds or benefit funds. That is where some of the money must be coming from. Does anybody feel their property taxes have been reduced? By the way, for 2024, there were 5 tax levied funds, excluding RCPD, and 2 pertaining to the library. They are the general fund, the debt service, employee benefits, fire equipment reserve, and fire pension, KPNF. Enough of the history. Commissioners, you are required during this public hearing to answer these objections. I ask that my time not be used when you're answering the objections. Nonetheless, I want to know why you are amending the budget, and I want to know specifically where the money is coming from. That was in the presentation, and I appreciate that. From each fund being. I want to express my objection to the 2024 budget amendment and ask that you do not pass the amendment, thus allowing the funds to be carried over to the 2026 budget to reduce the amount of authorized assessed ad valorem property taxes. I'm just talking about those 2 funds once again, since we pay a 0.5% extra, and that portion of the money has to come from that 0.5%, not all the other collections, only that 0.5%, as I understand it, according to the ordinance. So to reduce the amount of authorized assessed ad valorem property taxes, your carryover would be an additional $2.058 million, which would be wonderful. Carryover reserve grows so that next year, for those 2 funds specifically, you won't ask for property taxes for those, which, by the way, that would really be a nice thing considering the fact that we went up by, gosh, I just remember 3.99 mils. I can't remember exactly how much money that was. But nonetheless, I object. I would like to know why you cannot do that. Why do you have to amend it, and why do you have to put that money where it goes?
If I understood Rena correctly, statutorily, those 2 funds that you're referencing need to be fully funded, period. They cannot enter the next year with a negative balance.
Correct, Mayor, and if they are running negative, then sales tax would be the first line of transfer, but then the remaining would have to come from the general fund. That's the only other source that would be able to pay for that difference.
But commissioners, keep in mind, the previous year, for those of you who were on it, those 2 funds also got amended. So what's going on? What's going on with the modeling? What's going on with the forecast? Why are we down like that? year after year, 2022, 2023, 2024. Something's wrong. I don't know what it is. I'm going to make the assumption, as I look at the fund page for the tax levies, that the ending balance is going to be the same as the beginning balance when you do these transfers for the 2026 year, is what I'm talking about. Excuse me, the 2025 year. No, 2026.
Gary, I have a question for you. Do you know to the penny how much money you're going to spend next year? To the dollar.
Well, do I know to the dollar?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to spend the money I have, the money I don't have.
But do you know exactly that dollar amount today?
No.
Okay. So do you know how much we authorized for a budget in for 2024?
Yes.
How much was it?
Well, I'd look it up.
It was over $200 million.
I understand that.
The amendment that we're making today is $2 million. That is roughly 1% of our authorized spending. So that means we were forecasted within 99% of our authorized spending for 2024, and we are making a 1% adjustment because we statutorily have to. That is why we're making this adjustment.
Well, I can only take your word for it, mathematically. But the reality is, unfortunately, it's year after year. Why is it happening? Why isn't the forecasting more accurate? In fact, when we look at the levies or the transfers, what happens if the balances are different? I don't know. I'm just asking the question, not just for my sake, but for those who are listening and understanding, because the most complicated thing you do is the budget. The most important thing you do is the budget. It really is.
And I've answered your question. Thank you.
Mr. Earls, your 5 minutes is done. Thank you.
Is there anyone else who would like to comment on this item? Joe, did you sign in previously?
No, I did not.
Please make sure you do it after your comment.
I'm Joe Knopp at 104 Oakwood Circle. I share some of Gary's basic concerns that we're manipulating our budgeting process. My only concern is that at the beginning of the budgeting process, we conservatively estimate sales tax because we don't know what next year's sales tax is going to be. We do know with great reliability what our property tax is going to be. And so to make the budget work, we use a low income from sales tax and we rely heavily upon the dependability of the property tax. When sales tax rises beyond our conservative expectations, rather than put that money that we budgeted not to spend into reserves, as Gary says, we come back and we make budget amendments so that we can be authorized to expend it. Had we estimated our sales taxes more reliably, then we would not be forced to rely so heavily upon property tax. It's this manipulation of these estimates that makes the public think that we're being taken advantage of. We're being told the sky is falling in August and we've got to do property tax increases or we're going to not have any reserves and we're going to go broke. And 2 months later, we're giving tax abatements and we're giving sales tax revenue that we suddenly have to amend budgets to spend more, which only go into the base for the following year. So when you increase the tax, it's not based upon what you told us you were going to need to spend a year before, but it's based upon what you actually spent. So now the 4% that you increase is more like 5 or 6% or 7% of what you told us you were going to spend the year before. And that process, as Gary points out, goes on year and year. I wish that we could be a bit more clear in what our expectations are and what we're spending. Because it seems to me that in August we say we're going to spend this, and we only have enough money to spend this, and then as the year goes on, suddenly we find more money. And next year's budget starts here, it doesn't start here. Thank you.
Are there any additional comments from the public?
Joe, please sign in.
Joe, please sign in. Seeing no additional comments from the public, we will close that session, that part of this public hearing. Commissioners, do you have any comments or questions for Rena?
I'll just say, Rena, if you could forecast sales tax better than we are, I would recommend that you go and put that money in the stock market, because you would be making a lot of money. It's very difficult to forecast sales tax revenue. There's a lot of factors outside of it, and I think we do the best we can with what we've got. So, 99% is pretty damn good if you ask me. So, thank you, Rena.
I would also like to reiterate that the excess funds in the streets fund will be going to projects that we had anticipated deferring till next year. And so, given what we continually hear about the conditions of our roads and streets, I would think that some people might be pleased that we're able to tackle some of these issues sooner rather than later. So, Karen, did you have some?
I would just say the budget process is complicated, and perhaps we could be more opaque. But I would also point out that one of
Less
the...
opaque.
What?
Less opaque.
Less opaque, sorry. I'm, been here since '82. Anyway, I do think, one of the funds was the employee benefit, and having just met at the law board and looked at the budget, it's really, the health insurance issue is very complex, and it's hard to know. We have a lot of employees, and to keep them insured and to keep them having benefits sometimes is very difficult to program out for the next year.
Thank you. Do we have a motion to approve the first reading of an ordinance amending the 2024 city budget?
I move we approve the first reading of an ordinance amending the 2024 city budget.
Second.
Thank you. Commissioner Minton has moved to approve the first reading of the ordinance amending the budget, and Commissioner Opelt has seconded. Brenda, will you take the roll, please?
Commissioner Opel,
Yes.
Commissioner Motta,
Yes.
Commissioner Minton,
Yes.
Mayor Adamczyk,
Yes.
Commissioner McCullough.
Yep.
Motion carries 5-0.
Thank you. We will now move on to the general agenda. Our first item is to consider rezoning 300 North 11th Street and 1020 Leavenworth Street to low-density residential attached RL-A district with established neighborhood overlay, OEN district. Prior to the okay.
Just wanted to see what he wanted me to pull up.
Prior to the staff participation, each member of the governing body who has been engaged in ex parte communication with any individual either in favor of or against this matter being considered, must state that the communication occurred and indicate that even in light of having engaged in that communication, you are able to fairly, objectively, and impartially consider the measure based only upon the evidence provided in the record. So I will commence. I have had do I need to name the person? I have had a conversation with an interested party. I will also note that the commission as a whole has received maybe a half dozen emails and notes regarding this. I would like to take the opportunity to thank the majority of people who authored those notes for their courteous and thorough presentation. There was only one that was mildly insulting and cynical. So I appreciate the professionalism with which you corresponded with us. Thank you. Karen, have you?
Sure. I had a number of emails. I was careful not to reply, and I haven't spoken to anybody about this issue who's involved.
Yeah, I've also had several emails from concerned individuals, both for and against. Yeah.
Same as the others, there was one I replied to declining a meeting and also copying the city manager and city attorney because they brought up some legal things that I said I would pass those on.
I received various emails as well.
Thank you all. Stephanie, will you present your presentation?
Stephanie Peterson, Director of Community Development. You do not have a presentation for you this evening as this is second reading, but on November 5th, the City Commission approved the first reading of a rezoning based upon the findings that were in the staff report. The staff report recommended the rezoning addressing the Commission's decision factors. Those were on page 3 if you want to go back and reference those. After the Commission approved first reading, City staff received a protest petition that was determined to be invalid. That petition was attached to the agenda item summary for you. If you have any specific questions on the protest petition, I'll defer to Katie Jackson, our City Attorney, to answer any of those. I would note that this is second reading of the Commission, and this is considered the Commission's final action. To approve the rezoning, the Commission must override the Planning Board's decision to deny the rezoning and then adopt the findings in the staff report. The override would require 2/3 vote or 4 of the commissioners that are currently voting and present this evening. Just as a reminder, you do have 2 other alternatives. One of those would be to adopt the Planning Board's recommendation by a majority vote and decline to adopt the ordinance that's before you. That would rezone the item. Or the second option you would have is to return the Planning Board's recommendation to them with a statement specifying the reason as to why you returned it to them. And when that item was to come back before you, it would require then a simple majority to override the Planning Board's new recommendation. I will pause there to see if there are any questions or anything that you would like for me to expand on. What I did not read is that this rezoning is for 300 North 11th Street and 1020 Leavenworth Street from RL with the established neighborhood overlay, and it's being rezoned to, or the request is to RLA, and keeping that overlay intact.
There was a question about one of the signatures on the petition for 1016 Leavenworth Street. Have we looked more into that, Katie?
So I'm looking at the petition now. The owner of record were 2 individuals, and we only had a signature from 1 individual. If that property ownership has changed due to death, divorce, or some other process, that the petitioners are required to provide that documentation to the city. If they do not, then that is not a valid signature because all owners have not signed the petition.
So where do we look up the owner of record?
Oh, the Register of Deeds.
Okay.
I will note that the applicant for this is present this evening should you have any additional questions for them as well.
Commissioners, are there any other questions for Stephanie at this time?
Oh, I do have a question, just for clarification. Had we deemed the protest petition valid, how would that change the way we would vote tonight?
I'll let Katie answer that.
In this case, because in order to approve the rezoning, you are overriding the planning board's decision. By statute, at this phase in the process, that requires 4 of 5 of you to vote to approve the rezoning. The protest petition does the same thing. Essentially, it is the supermajority. It's 4 of 5 of you would have to vote to approve the rezoning. So it doesn't have a practical difference. It doesn't make a practical difference in this case to approve the rezoning because it's an override. It would have, if you think of it another way, if the planning board had approved the rezoning, it would take a simple majority to agree with them. The protest petition then would have required 4 of you to vote. But in this case, since it requires an override to rezone, there's no practical difference in the vote that is required tonight.
Thank you. I know there was a lot of work put into that. Just want to make sure everything is clear.
All right, we will open for public comment on this item. Scott, I believe, are you the first? Nathan, okay. Nathan already was here, he left. Mel, you're next on the list.
Good evening, Commissioners. I'm Mel Borst, 1918 Humboldt Street. It is important to share perspectives of how citizens you represent feel when their quality of life, property, and due process rights are denied by our city government while acting as agents to facilitate oversized infill developments in direct conflict with our community's adopted land use plan, guidance, and related zoning protections. As such, I would like to introduce Elaine Shea. Elaine, this is Mayor Adamczyk, Mayor Pro Tem McCullough, Commissioner Opelt, Commissioner Matta, and Commissioner Minton. Elaine is the property owner of record that is not recognized as such by the city when denying her neighborhood spot zoning petition validity to you and the public in preparation for tonight's second invalid rezoning hearing. Elaine and her husband, Don, owned and resided at 1016 Leavenworth Street for several decades. Besides raising their family there, Elaine and Don also looked after my young sisters after the death of our mother in 1977. After the death of Don approximately 20 years ago, Elaine removed his name from the property's deed at the Raleigh County's Registers of Deeds office, which was verified by that office last week. Apparently, the city did not do the same, as the determination of a valid petition would have resulted. If this multifamily spot zoning proposal is approved tonight, instead of having a beautiful bungalow duplex and its large yard as a west adjacent neighbor, Elaine's beautiful family home could be 3 foot away from a huge infill structure that will jet out into the front yard, blocking her wonderful views of City Park, along with the introduction of unlimited pavement and a lot of car activity in the backyard. Elaine agrees that the city's efforts to facilitate and encourage spot zoning into the East Park neighborhood will not only lead to the destabilization of her neighborhood, but by its precedent, threaten stability and future of the rest of Manhattan's traditional and historic neighborhoods. I now ask our city representatives how they feel about conducting tonight's second and final reading of the spot zoning hearing and vote on November 5th, when the state-mandated quasi-judicial process was invalidated with the premature hearing and vote. Planning board minutes lacked critical comments from the public and the board, and before a valid protest petition was submitted, all required for commission and public consideration before the first hearing and vote. There are many not aware of any other city that is regulated by Kansas Statute 12-757 to hold a quasi-judicial first hearing and vote. The required 14-day protest period is over. Before the required 14-day protest petition is over, and any protest petition filed within that period is legally verified. Tonight's second reading also a retro first reading? How does that comply with state statute requirements, due process, and our ethics ordinance? Why can't aggrieved citizens appear via Zoom tonight, as the developer and the commissioner were allowed to do earlier in this rezoning process? Most importantly, how would you feel about having your names on permanent public record for supporting this city government conduct that denies the citizens you represent property and due process rights? Please vote to halt this invalidated rezoning process tonight before any more loss of city government trust and integrity. Thank you.
Thank you, Mel. Sarah, do you wish to make any comments at this point?
Evening, Commissioners. I guess my first comment is thank you for taking this off the consent agenda. We appreciate the opportunity to make public comment. I'm Sarah Fisher. I live at 811 Osage. I've lived there since 2000, 24 years ago last month. You may remember, if you've been around that long, that this was about the time that we were going through some downzoning. There were some zoning changes. There was some downzoning in some parts of the city. There were some upzoning in other parts of the city. And the neighborhood that I live in, which is sort of known as East Park neighborhood, didn't have anyone to represent it. So we were sacrificed. I've heard old timers use that term. We were sacrificed. Myself and my neighbors, we noticed some changes right away. Changes came pretty quickly to zoning, but we spent the next 15 years coming to this body, coming before Planning Board, coming before BZA, asking, please protect our older neighborhoods, please make some zoning changes. And 15 years ago, 9 years ago this month, Mayor McCullough heard us, and we were downzoned to an R1. It was just magical. We very quickly started seeing changes the other way. We saw rental properties become homeowner occupied. Matter of fact, one of my neighbors who moved into a former dilapidated rental is here tonight. He's a neighbor, he's a homeowner on my block. It was, things changed. It was good for us. But I admit I was a bit complacent and kind of rested a little bit, and I didn't notice that public hearing sign that went down on Leavenworth. It wasn't until someone else brought it to my attention. I didn't rally the troops like I had done for 15 years before that. But that's really beside the point as I've come to understand it. As I've come to understand the situation, the Planning Board denied this change. The neighbors appear to deny this change, but this body thought it was okay. And I don't really understand why. I don't want to be cynical, I don't want to be insulting, but I don't understand why. What is it about the decisions that were made here? I don't know exactly what legislatively needs to happen either. It sounds like you've got a couple options. You could send it back to the Planning Board, you could go along with the Planning Board, I don't know. But what I do know is that it feels like these older neighborhoods are disregarded. It feels like developers get what they want. It just feels very familiar to me. And that the historical integrity of the older neighborhoods is often disregarded. It's dismissed. And sometimes it feels a little personal. I know we're not supposed to talk about personal feelings here. But what I ask you is please reconsider this issue. Please do not allow for this spot zoning. The arguments we were making before 2015 could be made again. We have historical integrity, we have creep, we have protecting property owners, we have stewardship. I could be making all those arguments again, and maybe one of my neighbors will make it. But I just ask that you please reconsider. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Zach Klentz.
My name is Zach. I live on 922 Humboldt. I have an 8-year-old daughter. And I spent a lot of time working on my house. It's a historical house. It's that white brick house, if anybody's ever seen it. It's 2-story. I spent a lot of time trying to make it look good for the neighborhood, and an apartment complex just down the street doesn't do anybody any good except for the person that's building it. So that's it.
Thank you. Mike?
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Michael Masseri, and I reside at 1015 Leavenworth Street. I really hope that you have read the letters submitted by multiple other citizens, because there's some very valuable information in them that I don't have the time to go over this evening. But the issue I really want to address this evening is related to the criteria that city staff explained as the only factors for which you should be considering when making your decision on the rezoning of this property. I have spoken to a couple people educated on this matter and was told that those criteria are in fact not binding and merely guidelines or suggested factors, but not the only things you can take into consideration. I even spoke with an attorney who pointed me towards a case that went to the Supreme Court of Kansas. Davis versus Leavenworth, December 7th, 1990, which stated, "These factors were meant to aid both cities and the courts in addressing zoning decisions and are not to be rigidly applied as the only basis for zoning determinations." This tells me that you can take other factors into consideration that might have an impact on your decision-making process. I would also like to emphasize how much of a slippery slope the approval of this spot zoning will be, and how difficult it will be to stop further and more egregious degradation of our historic neighborhoods by developers that have no intention of ever living where we do. It feels like we do not have anyone fighting for our rights, and that between the city, Chamber of Commerce, and developers, we will get steamrolled every time. Who's fighting for our rights? We thought the downzoning of 2015 had done what we were hoping, which was to provide the protection to our neighborhood. But now, here we are. I understand the evolving nature of cities, but there still needs to be predictable rules for people to feel comfortable investing in their neighborhoods. I urge you to reconsider your vote from the previous City Commission meeting. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. And Eric Olson.
Eric Olson, 801 Osage Street. It's an honor and a privilege to speak to City Council. I am a little overwhelmed by the process. I hadn't planned to speak, but some people encouraged me to speak. I'm particularly loath to speak on things that I'm involved newly in. And as a newcomer to the city, this is a lot of the details are way over my head, and I rely on City Council for good governance, just like anywhere. But in this rare case, because people who are familiar with this and have been following this for years, encouraged me to speak on a slightly more personal level about this. I guess I'll overcome my reluctance and just give a couple words about what may be relevant or may not be. If not, it's understood. So I purchased the home on Osage in January, and took possession, had a tenant. I took possession in June. And this is related to some family stuff that's going on. Very brief background. I'm from Sacramento. I've lived in Berkeley and worked in Berkeley and Oakland the last 25 years. So in 2006, I had a partly successful eye surgery that ended up in some eye disfigurement in my right eye and also some brain damage. And I changed my job at that point to a high school teacher. And I've been teaching AP stats, econ and stuff until I retired a couple of years ago. I went to Cal Berkeley before brain damage and so on. But at any rate, I knew when I became a school teacher, I'd never be able to own a home in California. That was a major change in my life. So when I got to retirement, I looked at the next best thing. I'm involved with the ocean a lot, do a lot of aquatic activities. I look for the Great Lakes. And had made a bid on that when a family member, a step-parent here in Manhattan, had a medical emergency. And I looked at the Manhattan area. I'd come here. When my mom first was remarried, I'd lived here for a short time when I was very young. And I'd come here during the holidays, so I'm familiar with Manhattan to a certain extent. And so I expanded my housing search here, and part of the part that's most relevant here, I think, is that I'm not a flipper. I'm not here for financial gain for any reason whatsoever. I have no interest in that. In fact, I intend, hopefully, to pass the home to a family member when I pass. But I was careful, and I must ask the realtor 4 times, emailed, text, and everything, to check on R1 zoning in this area. And the areas that I like and that are worth the most money outside of immense mansions built for Facebook owners and so on in the Bay Area, the most valuable neighborhoods are the ones with traditional lot sizes that were built from 1905 to World War II. Arts and crafts homes and so on. And any neighborhoods like that have become blighted, just like Detroit and so on, have been gentrified, and significant tax base comes out of that. So in the long run, the most valuable homes in the Oakland, Berkeley area, outside of immense mansions, as I just mentioned, are areas with traditional lot sizes and so on. And even though I'm not here to make money, I didn't want to lose money in Manhattan. And I relied on the zoning that I saw as being R1 when I made my purchase. And the city is certainly welcome to do what it's going to do. And I have friends that are in the trades, and I'm not against the trades or development. I have close friends in the trades. But I also may make some changes then about staying here and so on like that if the zoning of R1, which now has been renamed, is strictly on paper only, and is just going to get spot zoned to however it might be. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Scott, do you want to make any remarks now?
Good evening. My name's Scott Sewell, 85 Pride Drive. I also own property down on 431 Potawatomi. I've been affected by spot zoning. 407 Potawatomi was purchased by MCM. The house was dozed down, and then they went in for a zoning change. Went before the zoning board. They said no. It came before the commission. They hem-hawed around, went back to zoning. They said no, comes back to the commission. Mayor Hassel at the time decided to change the rules of the game on how we could talk. We were limited to 2.5 minutes, 5 people, limited to. This all happened on June 20th, 2023. The neighborhood, everybody on Potawatomi Street that lives from Juliet towards the MCM, every single neighbor came down and said, we don't want this. This is going to affect our neighborhood. It's going to make it already worse than it is. It is literally one of the oldest neighborhoods in Manhattan. It's been there from the very beginning. MCM got their wish. MCM has dozed the house. It is a lot of junk. They have built nothing on it. They've done nothing to it, but the board said, yeah, MCM, they're a great company. They're a big company. They're all about the community. They're not a big company. They're not a Manhattan company. The Chamber of Commerce came in, said, oh yeah, these are locals. They're not locals. They're not locals. And you allow spot zoning to affect an old neighborhood, one of the original neighborhoods, and nobody stood up for it. MCM is up here, locals are down, way down here. Those families are still there. There's a house that sold, it was blocked, so MCM couldn't get it, and so we could preserve that neighborhood. I really wish that this board would take stuff like that into consideration. Take in consideration the neighbors. Take in consideration of your environment. Don't go for the money. Don't go for the big people. Don't go for these out-of-town companies or local companies that want to throw apartments up in beautiful neighborhoods. Vote for the community. Vote for the people. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. Are there any additional comments from the public? I see that the applicants for this zoning change are here. Do you wish to make any comments?
Good evening, Commission. I just want to say thank you for
Please
the...
name your name.
Gavin Schmidt, 155 South Dartmouth Drive. So I just want to say thank you for your all your hard work on this. I know these are always tough decisions. They're always emotional decisions, and there's always a lot of nuance in this. I just want to reiterate that RLA is single-family zoning. This is single-family attached zoning. So I hope you continue to stick with your decision from last commission when we had this vote. I hope you continue to evaluate the 7 criteria, and thank you for your opportunity.
Please just add your name to the signature list. Any additional comments? Seeing.
Do I sign my name after?
Yes, you can sign it afterwards.
All right. Hi, my name is Olivia Masseri, and I live on 1015 Leavenworth. I come on my own volition because like many of us here, I deeply care about historical housing, this neighborhood, and this town. The area I live in has started to be viewed as an economic jackpot as the rec center is planned or trying to be planned to be built in the middle of City Park, further compromising every building near it. All of these townhomes will be a result of greed. More money in one place equals more money in the next. Historical housing should be prioritized, not compromised. No house is beyond repair, and any historical house can be restored. People already live in this home, and you have the heart to kick them out and to say, too bad, find somewhere else to live. This petition was not created for you to go for these townhomes to be built for a second time. So I sincerely ask for you to not pass this.
Any additional comments from the public? Thank you, John, for your silent comment. Thank you all for your silent comments. We get the picture, literally. Seeing no additional verbal comments, we will close public comments on this item. Does city staff have any final comments regarding this issue? Commissioners, if you have any questions for staff, now is the time.
Stephanie, I know we kind of talked about this before, but can you talk a little bit more about the neighborhood overlay and the restrictions that are involved with that?
Yes, so with the established neighborhood overlay, that would limit, typically we would allow townhomes up to 5 units in the RLA district, that single-family attached district. The overlay, it restricts it where there can be no more than 3. Along with that, there are rather stringent design standards to make sure that any remodel, renovation, or new structure would conform with the surrounding neighborhood, with setbacks, with roof pitch, with certain materials. I would have to look again and read through what those are, but that overlay exists to make sure that the integrity of that established neighborhood continues to exist, recognizing that as homes get older, they may need substantial repairs or even replacement.
And then there was some discussion about the original lots there were 3 lots that were perpendicular to the current lines. Can you talk about that, please?
Yes. So the way that we describe this, when you look at GIS, there are 3 lots that go east-west, and that's part of our original town plat. When you look at the legal description, it talks about it's the lot for the property on Leavenworth. It is like the western 100 feet of what those lots are. So it's just not been platted under, it's not been platted with how we do it today. We would just use that original town plat, and then any changes, there would have to be, it depends on what that process is, but there would either have to be a replat, or we would have to look at how to establish that legal lot.
So there was a concern about if it is actually 3 lots, they could go from this one house with 3 units and put 3 units on each of those lots. Is that like, how would that work?
So if they wanted to do that, they would have to go through the replatting process, and they would actually have to replat those property. If you recall, and I can pull up GIS if it's more helpful, if you recall, there's 2 properties that are going north-south.
Mm-hmm.
So both of those structures then would have to be raised, and a replat would have to happen in order to accommodate the situation that you're talking about.
So is that a reasonable course of action for somebody to do?
From,
I mean, I'm just, how can we kind of settle that a little bit here?
I can't speak to whether if we were looking at a maximum of 3 townhomes for each of those 3 lots. I think I said last time, and I didn't look into it, we would have to look to see if it met setback requirements,
Mm-hmm.
if it, all of our bulk standards, to see if they could accommodate parking that would be required for those. That is not an analysis that we've done since the rezoning hasn't even taken place yet. So I can't speak to the maximum of how they would be able to develop those with.
But is the 3-unit restriction, is that per current
Lot.
city plat, or?
It's per lot.
Per lot, okay. So, I mean, technically, they could go through that process, but feasibly, fitting 3 units on a roughly 100-foot by 100-foot lot, it is not.
I can't answer that because we
Sure.
haven't looked at even accessibility of some of those.
Right.
There wouldn't be additional access allowed on Leavenworth, so that would be something that we would have to work through, how to get access from the alley. And I have not looked at what the width would be for a 3-unit townhome to see if it would fit on each of those 3 individual lots. We don't typically do that analysis until
Right.
we get a plat.
Okay. I know it's kind of out there. I just wanted to kind of go through the logic with that, so.
Stephanie, I don't quite understand what we expect to see there. I mean, I don't even understand why we're doing this. If those triplexes are single-family units, why does it have to be rezoned?
If those are legal nonconformities, and so if either of the properties in question, in order to establish those where it's a legal permitted use within the MDC, this zoning would allow for that. So that's where, and I should I should clarify, the way that the MDC is written right now, it would allow for 2 units in each of those. We don't allow for a kind of a stacked 3-unit situation. So either of the property owners could take the existing homes, they could remove one of the living units so that you only had 2 in each structure, and it would be legal. So if those were to be damaged beyond more than 50% of the value through some sort of natural disaster, fire, they would actually be able to rebuild those as 2 units versus today,
yeah.
they would have to rebuild as a single-family 1-unit dwelling.
I don't remember when we've ever had that happen. But what I don't understand is, so they can, without any kind of rezoning, build a duplex or not?
No, they cannot. That, it's restricted to 1 single-family detached unit currently.
Okay, detached.
Because this adds the A for the attachment up to 3.
Yeah.
Can we, Gavin, could you return to the podium? Perhaps you can answer Peter's question about whether the intention is to build 6 or 9 units as opposed to 3.
Can we talk about that during this process, Katie?
So in the past, we've been hesitant. He can answer the question, but just so everyone understands, he's not bound by whatever answer he gets. So we've focused in the past on sharing with the commission what the zoning district itself allowed, because this process doesn't approve a specific project or a specific permitted use that's part of that zone.
Mayor, I guess the comment that I would say then, kind of to speak to Katie's point and speak to facts, I have no ownership or no control or no contract on that house next to me, on that lot next to me. So as I stated in last commission meeting, that owner was in a similar situation that I was in with a non-conforming asset that he didn't feel comfortable investing in the neighborhood because he has this non-conforming use. And if there's damage, he's stuck. I don't know if you remember that situation that I think maybe one of the commenters said last time about that, about how you kind of almost disincentivize assets when you have non-conforming use. So I have no site control over that at all. I have no contract. So I guess hopefully those actions speak louder than words that wouldn't be my intention to bring in that second lot and try to redevelop for.
So you don't have a contract? You do have a contract?
So there's 2 lots that we're talking about.
Yeah.
I have a contract for 1 lot.
Okay.
The other lot next to me, the owner is in a similar situation, and so he wanted to get rezoned for his own purposes. I have no contract on that lot. I have no control over that. It's not my intention to do anything with that lot next to me.
So what did you plan to do on the lot you have a contract with?
Yeah, so what I'd hope to do, we're still working through some feasibility studies, but hopefully we could put some housing there. That right now that house is in terrible shape. It's dilapidated, it's falling down, it's crumbling. Some of the units aren't even livable. They're uninhabitable at the moment.
But what are you planning to do with it?
Yeah, so we're going through evaluations on the exact unit count that I would try to put. Obviously, zoning is going to limit me on what I can do there. So we're evaluating options on putting a newer home product there, a single-family home product there.
You're thinking about putting a single-family home there?
Single-family attached. We're getting in a little bit of the nuance, but yeah, single-family attached.
Attached?
That's right.
So
That's what this
a
zoning is.
duplex or a triplex?
Well, they would be like a townhome product is what we're currently.
Is it a duplex or a triplex?
So a townhome product, it would be, there'd be 3 units in that, up to 3
triplex.
units in that, yeah. But it's not I guess a triplex, I don't know if that's the right definition.
There are 3
A townhome.
things there, right?
Yeah, there's some definitions about stacking units on top of each other. This isn't allowed in RLA district. You can't stack units in
Right,
RLA.
but you're planning to put 3 units on that lot.
That's right.
And then possibly, if the owner and the zoning, another 3 units on the other lot would be what you would look at?
No,
No.
not correct.
There's a different owner.
It's a different
I know
owner.
there's a different owner, but you must have some plans for that other lot in the back of your mind or somewhere. You must have sat down and looked. I know it's a different owner, but just put paper to pencil to see if you could even make any money off of it.
He's not involved with the other owner.
So the other owner is not here?
Correct.
So why are we rezoning?
So this has happened actually several times. There was one that just came before you last month We oftentimes, in this situation, will have several property owners that have the same interest. So they will collectively come together, but they'll have one individual that kind of pursues the rezoning. That we do have owner consent from the other owner, but it was more that they were just interested in also having the same zoning district since they have a non-conforming use right now as well. Oh,
So you're just out of the goodness of your heart trying to rezone all these different properties to help people out?
It's only 2 properties.
Yeah, there's 2 lots.
Yeah.
And so I spoke with the other owner. I explained, I spoke with lots of other owners in this around the neighborhood. And this particular owner said, man, I'd love to do that. My home is non-conforming as well. So as Stephanie stated, he said, I'd love to do that. Do you mind if I get in your rezone with you? And I said, that's just fine. I'm going through the process. So he
But
wants
it
to.
seems like he ought to be here too. I mean,
I can't speak to him, why he's not here.
okay.
Commissioners, any other comments?
I have a lot, so, okay. All right, so I've done a lot of thinking and reading about this. And I went into the 2015 comprehensive plan. And I went into the minutes for the planning board from 2015 where the current zoning was introduced and the city commission meeting where they were approved. I learned a lot through that. One thing that I did learn was that that downzoning was far from unanimously desired by the affected property owners. There were several that felt that we should not be downzoning. And I understand that there are still a lot of folks who think that was the correct idea. I found an interesting history of zoning for this neighborhood. The first zoning was in 2025, and it was first dwelling house. 1925, excuse me. And you were able to have a first dwelling house for up to 2 families, so we could have 2 townhomes right next to each other. In 1940, there was added a second dwelling house, so you could have 2 properties on one lot with 2 families each. 1970, it was zoned. In 1970, it was zoned to R3, multiple family residential district. 1987 to 2004, RM, 4 family residential district. 2004 to 2015, RM with the traditional neighborhood overlay. And then in 2015 was chosen to be downzoned as there was an action item in the comp plan, Chapter 12, Table 10, if you're curious. And that action item was finalize the boundary and downzone the residential area east of City Park, identified on the future land use map, which identifies that area as low to medium density housing, to facilitate increased stabilization of this neighborhood. This was noted as a priority 2 action item. Further down that table, also as a priority 2 action item, we have review and revise zoning and subdivision regulations if necessary to determine if there are any barriers to achieving a mixture of housing types and densities in residential neighborhoods. So again, October 19th, 2015, we had the planning board meeting, and November 17th, we had the city commission meeting to talk about this rezoning. And in fact, a protest petition was filed against the rezoning. So it's a very similar situation, and I do want to acknowledge that unfortunately we have to make a decision tonight. So we do have to disappoint about half the people in the room this evening. Well, probably more than half the people or less than half the people in the room, but there will be people who are disappointed no matter what decision that we make. So we're in a really cool spot. We have 2 very conflicting action items of the same priority in the same comprehensive plan. But then we had the housing study that was amended to that comprehensive plan in 2020. The study was done in 2022, adopted and amended in 2023. And one of the biggest parts of that housing study was that we need to, at the bare minimum, maintain our level of housing stock, if not increase our level of housing stock, specifically in this missing middle market of these attached single-family homes or starter homes, if it were possible to build a starter home for an affordable price. We've talked all this year, this entire year, we have talked about affordable housing and what we can do to make our housing available to folks. So when we talk about this neighborhood, I've heard talking about protecting the neighborhood and protecting the value of the neighborhood and making it more valuable. The goal of this downsizing is to incentivize single-family housing only in this neighborhood. And that, to me, accomplishes two things. It makes the neighborhood exclusive, and it makes the neighborhood expensive. And that is in direct contradiction to everything that we have talked about this year. We have two folks here who are local. They both live in Manhattan. I see them at events and things. They live here. They are members of the community. And they want to invest in this neighborhood, but they are unable to. So the alternative is to potentially allow this house to become vacant and continue to deteriorate and crumble. And then what happens to it? It's in even worse condition, and it has no more value. And then it'll fall over, and somebody will build something else on it. So that is the question in front of us today, is do we want this house to continue to deteriorate, or do we want to allow people to invest in the neighborhood and build and at least maintain the density of the neighborhood currently? There are restrictions to the design. The neighborhood overlay protects the character, is entitled to protect, or is intended to protect the character of the neighborhood. And so I am supporting this because of those reasons. That's it. I mean, I did go so far as to contact Catherine Hensler at the Riley County Historical Museum this afternoon, just to kind of get her opinion on historic preservation. And she really didn't give me much new information, kind of just confirmed the thoughts that I had. And that's that preservation is difficult. It is valuable for specific purposes. This house, I don't know, and as far as she was able to tell me, this is not a specifically historic house. It is not protected. Sure, it's been there for a long time, but there is not a significant historic value to this specific property. So I understand that it's going to disappoint a lot of people, but I'm going to support this.
Thank you, Peter, and thanks for reminding us of prior events in this neighborhood. Is there any?
I would just, go ahead, Jamie. I would just say, wow, you did some fantastic research, and that's great. I'm proud of you. I'm just kind of confused about why we're rezoning 2 lots when we're really only going to have a builder that wants to build on 1 lot. But I think you also kind of, I wasn't here in 1982. I mean, I was here, but I wasn't. Yeah. But I was here when we did, in 2000, saved my neighborhood, so to speak, and downzoned it to R1. And then what happened in the next 15 years or so were a number of really bad spot zoning things that happened, the super duplexes that were on the other side of points. And so the older neighborhood, and Sarah can attest to this, the older neighborhoods get kind of tired of constantly having to be sort of on vigil. And what we did a comp plan, and John was there, and there were some disagreements. There were no question there were some disagreements. But basically, we downzoned that area and upzoned on the other side of Bluemont. And we thought that that would really kind of preserve the older neighborhoods. Now, I don't think one triplex is going to ruin the whole area, but I do fear spot zoning, and I do fear going against the comp plan. And even more, I fear going against the planning board. If we aren't happy with what the planning board said, I think we should send it back to them with our questions and ask them to tell us how this does fit into the whole plan for the east part of the park. I think we acted kind of lightly in just ignoring, we have boards, and the reason we have boards is because they're better at some things than we are. I agree we need housing. There's no question we need housing. But we're going from maybe 0 to 3 here. There's a lot of things that we're doing with housing that really have me quite worried. And particularly when we're abating property taxes in the future. So anyway, I can't support this. And it's probably because I live in an old neighborhood and know how people feel. And Potawatomi too. I mean, yeah.
I'll also commend Peter. I thought that was really good, going back and doing that. Definitely learned some stuff and all you went through with it that kind of reinforces where I'm at with this, is that when we talked about housing, and I know I've said a number of times, zoning was one of the things we were going to come up against as we did it, and talked about there would be some neighborhoods. We had one that had a drainage issue that they were worried about, and they still had a drainage issue even before the development. And that was one that said maybe we do something to fix the drainage issue besides not creating a new one. In this particular case, what we saw at the last meeting is we did meet those criteria for the zoning change. I think that history that Peter talked about also kind of reinforces why we might make it. Yes, other things can be taken into consideration, but they're taken into consideration both ways, which is our need for housing and also the fact that this is a minor zoning change, and we also happen to have the overlay protection to go with it. And so I think taking all that into consideration, I'll be doing the same vote as I did last time.
Jamie?
Same. We'll keep it short. I'm in agreement, and my vote has not changed.
Do we have a motion from the commission?
I move we adopt the findings in the staff report and override the Manhattan Urban Area Planning Board's recommendation and approve ordinance number 7732, rezoning 2 lots from low-density residential RL with established neighborhood overlay OEN district to low-density residential attached RLA district with established neighborhood overlay OEN district.
Second.
Commissioner Minton has made the motion to adopt the findings in the staff report and to override the Manhattan Urban Area Planning Board's recommendations and approve ordinance number 7732, rezoning 2 lots. And Commissioner Matta has seconded. Can you call the roll, please?
Commissioner Motta?
Yes.
Commissioner Minton?
Yes.
Mayor Amchek?
Yes.
Commissioner McCullough?
No.
Commissioner Opelt?
Yes.
Motion carries 4 to 1, I'm sorry.
Business as usual.
We'll move on to our next agenda item, considering authorizing sales tax exemption for the Flint Hills Breadbasket renovation project. Can we have a presentation of this item, please?
I think this might be me. Let me open this real quick. Per your guidance, Stephanie Peterson again, per your guidance at the last meeting for any sales tax exemption for the foreseeable future, we were going to move that to the general agenda for you to have an opportunity to have open discussion outside of the consent agenda. We received a request from the Flint Hills Breadbasket for an industrial revenue bond for a sales tax exemption for their new facility. The Gilmore and Bell's already drafted the resolution that was in your packet for you this evening. We do have Carla Hagemeister. Yeah, she's here. The director of the Breadbasket. She can speak more fully to their request and the project and answer any questions that you may have on that process. Were there any questions for me before I ask Carla to come up? Okay.
I may have some after Carla finishes.
Hello, Carla Hagemeister on behalf of Flint Hills Breadbasket. I don't have any great big presentation aside from just to reiterate this is to support our renovations to the building that we will be moving to at 2326 Skyview Lane. It is an existing building that we need to equip for what our future purposes will be. Although the Breadbasket is a 501c3 nonprofit entity, not all nonprofits are exempt from sales tax. And we are one of those that is not exempt from sales tax. And in this renovation process, we're in a capital campaign to raise the funds through foundations, grants, and obviously generous community support. So any opportunity that we have to pull those dollars into the actual building project as opposed to that sales tax and either reduce our total fundraising amount or roll it into the longevity and the benefit of the project itself is appreciated. My understanding, we are working with we are working with McCowan Gordon for our project total, and the sales tax estimate on materials that we would be considering here is about $80,000.
I believe it was listed as 55 in the materials that we saw.
Okay. It could have adjusted in the sense that when we first submitted the application, we had not finalized our dollar amounts from McCowan Gordon. We're still working on actually finalizing a guaranteed maximum price. And when that first application process went through, they had not completed the bidding process, but now they actually have the bids back from their trade partners. So I think we have a more accurate and complete dollar amount.
Stephanie, is that something that Carla would need to reapply for the higher amount? Ours says 55, or is it something that if we choose to approve it, can we approve it at 55 or 8? Like,
Can I ask you where you're seeing the 50?
on the application?
Okay, so that was, as she mentioned, that's an estimate. What Gilmore and Bell does is they take the total project cost, and so what's in the resolution should be $2.5 million. And then, Jason's not in here, I don't handle sales tax exemptions a lot. I don't know if Katie does, but it's not, the resolution never actually refers to what that sales tax is, that amount. It's never capped. It's based on that total project cost, but there's only certain expenditures. Yes, correct. There's only certain expenditures that are eligible under that sales tax exemption. If you have additional questions, he's okay.
Danielle, do you have?
Oh, the only thing I was going to add is we estimate the total project cost that would be eligible for a sales tax exemption to be about 35–40% of the total cost.
So I'm confused about why we are issuing an IRB up to 2.5 million if we're talking about an abatement of.
Sure, Jason can speak to why the total project cost is in those resolutions.
Bond counsel requires the entire amount of the project to be listed when you issue industrial revenue bonds to leverage the sales tax exemption. So if you think back to the ones you've considered previously, those were all reflected as the total.
When I read the resolution, the wording of it was a little obscure to me. It almost sounded as if we were purchasing or acquiring that property and leasing it to the Breadbasket.
Every sales tax exemption has very similar language. It's statute driven. It's bond counsel is obligated to put the language in the resolution. IRBs, we are a conduit. And as that conduit, we're going to reflect these actions as if we are issuing bonds. We have to do that in order to leverage the sales tax exemption.
So are we not actually issuing any bonds?
We will not issue bonds, as you generally understand the city issuing bonds. Industrial revenue bonds, it's required for the city to take this action to leverage this tool.
So, if I can chime in as well, Mayor and Jason, as Jason mentioned, it is conduit debt. We do have to reflect it in our notes to our financial statements. However, it would, and that's just the total amount, but we reflect it as whoever the issuer is, which would be the Flint Hills Breadbasket, but it's not city debt.
Okay, that was clear as mud. Thank you.
That's how I felt too.
All right. Okay. Commissioners, do you have comments for?
Public comment?
Oh, sorry. Are there members of the public who would like to? I'm so glad we work as a team here. Is there any member of the public who would like to make a comment on this item? Seeing none, we will close public comment. Commissioners, do you have questions for Stephanie or Carla?
No, I just want to congratulate Carla on the new building and thank her and her staff for all the work that you do for our community. It is a tragedy that you are necessary, but you are, and you do very good work, and we really appreciate it.
And I might add to that and just make a plug. Carla will be on K.S.A. on Friday. And speaking about the expansion and the work of Breadbasket and the demand for its services. So it's at 9 o'clock in the morning. Do we have a motion? Sorry, hold on. Do we have a motion to authorize sales tax exemption for the Flint Hills Breadbasket renovation project?
I move that we approve resolution number 111924 Tax C, determining the city's intent to issue industrial revenue bonds and authorizing a sales tax exemption for the Flint Hills Breadbasket's Building a Healthy Future at Flint Hills Breadbasket project.
Second.
All right. Commissioner Oppelt has moved to approve resolution number 11194-C, determining the city's intent to issue industrial revenue bonds, authorizing a sales tax exemption for the Flint Hills Breadbasket. Commissioner Minton has seconded. Clerk, will you please take the roll?
Commissioner Mitten,
Yes.
Mayor Adamchuk,
Yes.
Commissioner McCullough,
Yes.
Commissioner Opelt,
Yes.
Commissioner Motta.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
Congratulations, Carol. Moving on. All right, let's maybe move through this and take a break at 8 o'clock for a couple of minutes, assuming we're through this at 8 o'clock. Item number C on the agenda, consider Community Support Funds Advisory Board 2025 funding recommendations.
Thank you, Mayor, Commissioners. I'm Jared Wassinger, Assistant City Manager, and I'm also the staff liaison to our CISFAB Community Support Funds Advisory Board. Going to give you a little background this evening just on the board and the processes that they take to bring you all a recommendation on funding each year, and then dive into each fund that the board oversees and their recommendations. The Social Services Advisory Board and the Special Alcohol Funds Advisory Committee were dissolved back in 2023. They were two separate boards that oversaw each fund. The SSAB oversaw the social services funds, which came out of the general fund each year. And then the Special Alcohol Funds Advisory Committee oversaw recommendations for our special alcohol funds, which come from the state. Those were dissolved, and the commission created CISFAB in March of 23. And actually, I think that should be 24. No, 23, and this should have been 22. I'm sorry about that. But they created CISFAB, adopted bylaws. It's a 9-member board, and established how their funding process would go about, and they would oversee both funds and recommendations of both funds. They also adopted, guiding definitions and just general standards on how they define a social service and how they would recommend funding annually for you all. This is the second year that CISFAB has been doing funding. Last year was the first year for 2024 funding that the commission approved annual funding under CISFAB. So this is their second go around. They had a month-long application period this summer from July 9th through August 11th. We received 18 applications for special alcohol fund requests. There was $550,000 available in 2025, and requests exceeded $600,000. We received 21 applications for the Social Services Fund. This number was budgeted as flat as the same as 2024, so a little over 550 also available in Social Services Fund. Again, over $600,000 in requests. So our board needed to take some time to look at those and make determinations on how to get that down to what was available. The board does a process of allowing applicant interviews. So each applicant is allowed 5 minutes to speak, 2 minutes for questions and answers from the board. So they spend many hours, they did on the 4th and the 2nd, allowing those applicants to talk to their application and how they would use their funds and the needs that they're seeing. And then the board deliberated the following meeting and provided recommendations. I know this might be a little hard to see, but it provides a breakdown of previous year funding and then what the Community Support Funds Advisory Board recommended here in this green column. You can see here, this is what the agencies requested, what was recommended, and then the difference, or what was essentially cut to get down to the budgeted amount available. This table here reflects the special alcohol funding recommendations. Of the 18 applications, 17 were recommended funding. This is a breakdown of the social services funding from the general fund. Again, of those 21 applications, 20 were recommended funding. But as you can see from each table, not many agencies got what they fully requested due to the funding limitations. So tonight, we're asking the City Commission to approve the funding recommendations from the board. And then you would authorize the city manager to execute those 2025 grant agreements with those agencies. Those grant agreements provide for quarterly payments of those funds. They require a mid-year and end-of-year report from those agencies on how they're using those funds. But we would get those executed by the end of the year so that those payments could begin in January. Do you have any questions about any of the funding recommendations or the process in general?
Yeah, so I see we have some duplicates. Can you kind of talk about like how those will be, I mean, I guess kind of the process of deciding like we'll fund these for both. Is it just because they applied for both that they were able to get them, or?
So we have historically had agencies receive funding from both funds. I will say that the Special Alcohol Fund has a statutory requirement on what those funds are used for, which is for essentially drug and alcohol education, prevention, intervention. So just because an agency is receiving funding from both doesn't mean that the use of the funds is the same.
Yeah.
So those receiving special alcohol funds are strictly related to one of those categories related to education, prevention, intervention, whereas receiving social services is more just general support for programs or staffing.
And so the entire agency doesn't have to specifically be for, like for the special alcohol, the entire agency doesn't have to specifically be for drug and alcohol prevention, just the specific
program.
use of the money has
Yes.
to be for that.
Yep.
Yeah, because I don't think Boys and Girls Club of Manhattan is a specifically drug and alcohol prevention related organization, but
But they do
root
programming
causes.
that deals with education and prevention.
Sure.
Yep.
Okay.
And those are all outlined specifically in their application as to why they meet that need.
Jared, I have a similar question about True Colors. My understanding of that organization, I don't know how much formal programming it does. And my hesitation there is whether they have an explicit goal of providing drug and alcohol counseling or education, as opposed to simply providing a safe space away from the influence of drugs and alcohol.
That can exist across multiple agencies, I would assume, where, you know, the prevention role is you're providing an environment that allows the users of those groups to not be influenced by drugs or alcohol or those influences. So that is one of the reasons that True Colors articulated in their application. They also articulated in their application some specifics related to programming and education that they provide.
What's specific regarding what education? What is there do they have workbooks? Do they have a program? There's a formal class?
Not specifically, more so just general documentation that they provide.
They provide a documentation on alcohol and drugs?
Yes.
That was, because I looked at the application, I didn't see any. So.
It might not have been in the application. They did provide follow-up to the board, and that was noted in the minutes of some of the things that they offer, because it was a question that came up from the board, and this was one.
I did look at the minutes.
True
I
Colors
didn't see that.
Okay. I'd have to look back at that. This was one that, you know, passed 4-3 from the Community Support Funds Advisory Board in favor of funding. The board had similar concerns.
Yeah, because if it's just giving them something to do so they won't get involved in drugs and alcohol, I mean, 4-H, Rock Springs, Boys and Girl Scouts, you can.
Wonder Workshop,
Wonder Workshop.
which their application was denied.
The board, as you speak of, Wonder Workshop was a reason that they did not provide funding.
Thank you, Jared. Is there comment from the public on this item?
Sign in here in a second. Scott Seal, 1608 Denholm. I served, I don't know how many years, several years on the Special Alcohol Advisory Board. So before it was dissolved, largely over this particular issue. But I would push back a little bit as far as the specific programming related to drugs and alcohol. There are many organizations that have for years received funding from that fund that do not provide specific programming to do prevention of drugs and alcohol. But for years that I was on that committee, we took somewhat of an idle hands approach. So Boys and Girls Club, the school districts, Sunflower Casa is not doing specific drug and alcohol prevention programming, but there are things that they do that are able to prevent drug and alcohol abuse without being explicitly tied to that. So I would caution against saying, do you have specific programming on this topic, yes or no, and try to take a more holistic view as far as organizations that prevent help provide a safe environment that prevents drug and alcohol abuse among children specifically, which is what the original Special Alcohol Committee was tasked to do. So that would be my only addition to that comment. So thank you.
Thank you, Scott. Did you want to say something?
Hi, I'm John Ball, 3107 Harrahey Ridge, and a current member of the Community Sport Funds Advisory Board. I'm here to speak in support of our recommendation with the exception of one organization. You've already noted that True Colors only passed for recommended funding by one vote. I chaired Social Services Advisory Board for 3 years and have actually done the presentation here for the City Commission a few times. I'm uncomfortable with True Colors receiving funding. I can tell you all the other programs that we funded could articulate a clear and concise primary drug and alcohol education and training program. True Colors could not. If you look at their actual response to my question on that particular issue, they gave a very general answer back. There are multiple reasons not to provide special alcohol tax funding to True Colors. They do not qualify under the state statute as having a program that provides primary drug and alcohol treatment or prevention. This leaves the city open to sanction by the state attorney general for abuse of special alcohol tax funding. The second point is True Colors does not qualify under the Community Support Funds Advisory Board and the city's non-discrimination policy. The organization in its own mission statement in its application only supports and treats its treatment is solely based on gender identity and sexual orientation, and it is not open to everybody. There is, point number 3, there is no scientific evidence that the safe space treatment is effective in providing drug and alcohol treatment or prevention for minors. The guidance for this treatment comes from the Trevor Project, which is an advocacy group, and their guidance comes from preconceived ideas and not as the result of rigorous scientific method or research. In fact, there is scientific evidence that this approach is not effective and is in fact harmful in the long run for minors because it does not address the underlying mental health issues. These studies remind me of, for those that are older, of the studies that the cigarette lobby put out as saying that smoking cigarettes was safe and not harmful. They sponsored that research, and it was not rigorously based on real scientific data. Point number 4, if the city funds True Colors, then they are supporting the organization's actions, which in turn will make the city liable for any future legal actions from minors who are unhappy with the treatment and the guidance they receive from True Colors. True Colors may not exist, but the city will. And so if they go away and there's an unhappy minor that wishes to sue a deep-pocketed organization, that's the city. We see those cases starting to crop up in other states right now. Finally, there's insufficient alcohol funding, special alcohol tax funding, to resource all the other drug and alcohol treatment or prevention programs in Manhattan. So diverting money to True Colors denies additional funding to other programs that have been proven to be effective. Commissioners, I'd ask that True Colors not be funded for the reasons that I have outlined, and I appreciate you listening to me. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Would you please sign in at the podium? Commissioners, is there anyone else who would like to make public comment? Seeing none, we will close public comment. Commissioners, do you have any additional questions or comments?
Yes. Again, I think we've already listed the reasons. I think John did a good job, and I think the main one is that they don't have a program. If we have others who don't have programs, I think we need to reinforce you need to have a program in order to get the funds, because if not, there's so many groups that could say they're providing a safe space or occupying people's times, or things of that nature. Also, as I look at the application, there's one question. What would be the impact if the funding is denied or reduced? If the funding is denied or reduced, directly impact the amount of the time the executive director is able to spend providing direct services and oversight to the youth attending the True Colors House. So again, just about any organization, I mean, could say, I'm using it to fund my executive director. You take away that money, I'm not going to be able to supervise them as much, but is that really what this fund is for? So I make no bones about it, though. If people have followed the commission, I have asked to stop the funding for True Colors the past 2 years. Not really using this rationale, but using more of what John said at the end of wanting to protect kids and not believing in the gender-affirming care and the counselors that they have recommending people for hormone therapies and surgeries and things of that nature. So that's still part of mine, but I think on a pure technical grounds, it doesn't qualify for the funding.
I don't believe that's part of True Colors practice.
I have an email we received from their counselors, and it says that if at any point a youth seeking mental health services
Your button's off there.
is wanting to discuss gender, sexuality, or even the potential of pursuing medical treatment, such as gender-affirming hormones, blockers, and hormone replacement therapy, our clinicians are trained to provide the education, support, assessment, and referrals for both youth and their caregiver, either UMKC Gender Clinic, University of Kansas Health Systems, Transgender Medicine Team, or Children's Mercy Gender Pathway Clinic. And I've also gone on to their website and found, the similar thing there.
Thank you.
So I've done pretty extensive research on it.
Jamie?
I have comments about the social service funding, but on the special alcohol, I have concerns, I think, with multiple funds, and we talked about K.S.A didn't have the direct programming. I couldn't find that from Big Brothers Big Sisters either. It actually looked like both social service and special alcohol had the exact same application. To be honest, I may have clicked on the same link twice, but it didn't look like they were differentiating. So I think I have concerns with that, and I would put True Colors in that, just in grouping all of those in, specifically because they also decided to deny the Wonder Workshop because it didn't have specific enough. And then from the fund integrity, I just am encouraging them to really focus on who's doing true programming because it is that's a growing group. Did listen to the meetings. I had some, I think, concerns with some of the rationale. With K.S.A, it felt like that decision was very much influenced by the fact that they lost some of their other funding. And I think that really impacted how much they were given. My concern is also just making sure the programs are specific to alcohol funding, or to, and that's not what I would say, to alcohol prevention and intervention. So those were my concerns, but I do think it's worth a discussion, a bigger one on that specifically because they denied another group access to funds.
I think the other thing too is we look at this, with all the problems we have with fentanyl and everything else here, and we look at budget issues too. We look at, we funded that program at the jail, which helped out with the budget and is going for directly this, that we have to have more scrutiny, that we have real programs for this stuff, because we have plenty of people who can use the money.
Well, to Karen's point earlier, I feel uncomfortable with us cherry-picking some of these organizations when they have been through the review of the board and those questions have been asked. True Colors was approved 4-3 by the board, and I don't think, short of us sitting on those committees, on those boards, hearing the applications, The minutes were a little sketchy on some of the items. I would prefer if we were able to approve across the board, raise these concerns with the Community Support Funds Advisory Board to be more mindful of these issues that we're raising in the future, and move forward.
I can't. This is the third year in a row. I fear this one I might not win. But you heard my main concerns. I've got tons of data, quotes, everything else that you might want regarding. Europe has really started to figure this out and is moving away from the gender affirming care. It's kind of where it started with the Dutch protocol, and now they've reversed it after the Cass review and closed down Britain's gender clinic. And I think that's going to be coming to the United States as people learn more about it. But to me, it's protecting kids, and I think we have the technical rationale for the denial, so I won't support it.
I'll move that we approve the 2025 Community Support Funds Advisory Board funding recommendations for special alcohol funds and social services funds, and authorize the city manager to execute a 2025 grant agreements with respective agencies.
Second. I was going to say something. Can I still say something? When we started doing the community funds, we targeted $1 million for those funds, and we kind of have gone backwards for quite a while because we're only handing out $500,000. And I think the important thing about these funds, wherever they come from, is that they do support staff. It's really hard. I sit on a number of committees that gives grant money out, and we don't want to give grant money out for staff. That's just the way the rules. And so for the emergency shelter and some of the others, this is just their saving, the way they make things happen, and it also can be used for match, so they can go out and get more grants. So I would definitely think we need to support this and move forward with it.
I just wanted to chime in because I think Peter's motion approves both of those. I wanted to add in that I was a little frustrated that they went ahead and moved forward with the senior center grant since they missed the deadline for applying. And so I would support, I know they discussed that at the meeting, I would support that they hold very firm to that. I also want to point out there was a conversation about two entities, Be Able and Habitat for Humanity, where housing was referenced and how maybe not giving as much from that fund because there's other funds available, but just pointing out there's limited funds for housing, so wanting to support those initiatives. The decision was made to fund Shepherd's Crossing fully, which did also support housing. So I really want to encourage this board to apply their logic equally across and to really look at what each group is asking for and apply that the same across the board.
And Jamie, I'd just say, I think Wonder Workshop, they're not quite sure where they're going since they've lost their main person. So, I mean, that may be part of it. They're just kind of up in the air.
Commissioner Oppelt has made the motion that we approve the 2025 Community Support Funds Advisory Board funding recommendations for special alcohol funds and social service funds, and authorize the city manager to execute the 2025 grant agreements with the respective agencies. Commissioner McCullough has seconded. Can we have a roll call, please?
Mayor Adamchuk?
Yes.
Commissioner McCullough?
Yes?
Commissioner Opelt?
Yes.
Commissioner Motta?
No.
Commissioner Mitten?
No.
Motion carries 3-2.
It's 8:13. Let's take a break and return here at 8:25. No.
Thank you. Did I really say that?
We will be resuming the meeting in 1 minute. Please retake your seats. Commissioner Minton and, oops. I'm waiting for the clock to tick. It is 8:24. We are resuming the November 19th, 2024 City Commission meeting, and we will proceed with item D, discussing performance measures for outside agencies requesting transient guest tax funds. Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Mayor, Commissioners. We have a couple discussion items within one tonight, discussing annual contracts. It's a continuation from our budget discussions this summer, but also any further guidance we would like to put into requirements related to our outside agency contracts. Tonight, I'm going to discuss the budget for the TGT fund. Here in 2025, go over and remind you all of the requests that outside agencies made requesting TGT funds this year, and then allow you all to continue your discussion related to performance measures and metrics that you'd potentially like to require of any of these agencies. This is a breakdown of the TGT fund. In the first column, you have your 2024 projections that we've calculated through the end of the year, and then the budget that was passed for 2025. We had a healthy cash balance this year in 2024 in the TGT fund. This last year, we approved $1.5 million in funding for outside agencies. And then we have some annual payments that we've typically funded through TGT fund, our Annenberg Turf debt, Conference Center debt, the Conference Center expansion debt. We did have a kind of unrecognized budget from the downtown elevator upgrades that we needed to make in the downtown garage. And then based on our budget discussions, we had talked about a $1.5 million transfer to the general fund to help with cash balances. Typically, this transfer has been around $100,000, $150,000, and we've used that to fund some of the downtown beautification efforts. So that's a substantial increase from prior years, but a big jump there. Based on the projections, we're actually looking at more of like a $400,000 beginning cash balance in 2025. And an estimated $2.7 million in transient guest tax revenues in 2025. You can see here you got about a $400,000 increase in outside agency requests for 2025. And then these annual commitments remain steady here. These were the agencies that requested funding and provided presentations to you all this summer. Aggieville Business Association is requesting an increase of $30,000. Downtown, $93,000. Manhattan Arts Center with a $6,300 increase. The Wolf House is maintaining their same request at $5,000 as last year. And then the CVB has a $267,000 increase over their 2024 request. So overall, just under $400,000. I will, remind you too that we were allowed to kind of continue this discussion into the fall because the budget amount is set. We execute contracts with these agencies usually here in December, which outlines the funding that you are willing to provide them. So that is the direction that we're looking for tonight on to what level do you want to fund these requests so that we can bring forth those contracts to you all here in December. These service agreements, we have two with the CVB and the Chamber, and that's where kind of discussion led on performance metrics and performance measures. I did want to just provide you a little background on what these agreements entail. The CVB has quarterly installments. They require monthly reporting and quarterly presentations to the City Commission. We usually schedule those on work sessions. The Economic Development Fund, which is separate from TGT, it's our EcoDevo fund, has multiple contracts related to the Chamber of Commerce and our military relations contract that we have with them. That industrial promotion contract has consistently been around, prior to, I believe it was around 2020, it was around $180,000, and that increased to the little over $500,000 request that they have, which was their base and expanded services. Those are in monthly payments. They also provide monthly reporting and an annual presentation to the City Commission. A reminder that there was an agreement to our economic development service agreement with the Chamber of Commerce in 2023 related to the Elevate Fund, and their first disbursement that they received was in 2024. And any future subsequent installments to that Elevate Fund, they would need to gain that support from the City Commission and provide reporting updates in the event that they are going to be willing or wanting to pursue that in the future. I know there's representatives from the Chamber and the CVB tonight, and they did provide you all a kind of outline on some of the metrics that they are tracking and would like to track in the future, so I'll leave it up to them to provide any comment related to that. But tonight, really looking for Commission feedback on those recommended funding levels for those outside agencies, so we can get those contracts in front of you all by the end of the year. And then looking to continue that discussion tonight related to performance measures. Are there specific measures that you want to tie to these service agreements and their funding requests? Does it have a bearing on their future funding allocations is another comment that came up this summer. And then when do you want to do it? What's the realistic time frame that you would want to implement these? Are you looking to implement them here in a month with their current contract that's coming up, or are we looking to maybe build these into their 2026 agreements?
Thank you, Jared.
Yep.
You want to dive in?
I mean,
I have some specific comments about the metrics that were presented, but let's first discuss levels of funding.
So, yeah, Jared, will you go back?
Oh, I'm sorry. Jim.
Public comment?
Are there members of the public who would like to make any remarks on this agenda item?
Can I ask a question? If possible, if they're not doing public comment, can we ask questions as kind of experts from, if we need to, from Dennis, Gina, Marcia, Jason, anyone else? Any other TGT fund requesters? Is that appropriate?
That is appropriate, yes.
Okay.
All right. John?
I'll just make the general comment, which won't be any surprise, that on the funding levels, I don't think we should increase the funding levels at all. They should stay at what last year was. I made that argument when we did the budget. Obviously, I was going to use it for mill levy reduction, which we can't do, but we could still bank those monies. One of the things when we passed the budget, we took $2 million out of debt service. I think that's going to come back to haunt us in the future as we go forward, so it'd be nice to have a little money in reserve to be able to account for that. We didn't give raises to city staff. We did a lot of cuts. I just can't vote for increases, especially for some of these very large increases for these outside agencies when we've done that city staff proper. I know when we did the salary ordinance, Karen voted no because she still wanted to get increases. You should have done that sooner. I can't say for sure I would have voted for it, but if I couldn't get the tax increase, I might have been willing to use this money, but you didn't do it before we voted on the budget. So.
Jamie?
I mean, I'm no surprise here. I'm still on that. For us to change our current budget situations, we have to find ways to bring in more revenue. which means we have to invest in our revenue strategies, which to me are, this, I'm speaking of the TGT funds, that those entities are what's going to generate more sales tax. I think as well, when we've talked about metrics a lot, and you know, one thing I'm kind of frustrated with, I don't know that I have all the data to be prepared to say, this is where you need to be for X, Y, and Z. I do think even on the metrics the chamber provided, it's one thing to say, yes, we're reporting on these certain things, but we haven't said, okay, you have to be here, or here is your goal, or here's your target. So when we're having these discussions, it's not just about looking at it, it's about establishing those targets. I don't know that I have the information today to say, this is where you have to be. And I think there's a bigger discussion on what is also and maybe that's today's discussion, but what is something that can be tracked by the city, confirmed by the city? We can say we want, you know, these entities to do X, Y, and Z, but if it's not something we can fact check, then that's not something we should be measuring or necessarily holding them to or tying funding to.
And I might ask Jason to come up. These indicators were previewed today at the Chamber's Board of Directors meeting, and they are items that the Chamber has identified that they will be reporting to their board themselves. And my comment previously was precisely that. What are the baseline numbers? What are the targets that we would want to see in order to track performance?
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you all for taking up this topic and letting us be here today. So you're correct. We did not set goals. Our board plans to do that. I think what they were interested in is feedback from you all first. I think we view this as a partnership, and so understanding your expectations is part of that dialogue, right? So we will set goals for all of those. However, whatever it is in all, I mean, it's 2 pages, right? So whatever of those that you all would like, we're happy to work with you on what you think is the reasonable goal. Because there's some of that's organizational, that we have a lot more influence on, and there's some of it that's community-wide. And I've used this example when I talk to people about particularly room nights, is, you know, how much is impacted when you have 7 home games versus 6 home games, or when K-State basketball conflicts with 2A basketball and we don't get the 2A basketball tournament that year, which is the case that's happened this year. You know, there's external circumstances that impact sort of the overall room nights where we might have had a great year, but 2 or 3 of those events that are out of our control tend to have a negative impact on the overall numbers. And so how do we account for that? And I think that's important. I do want to mention real quick because I just want to remind everybody on the CVB request, we have a committee that is appointed because of our contract with you all. It's specifically in the contract that we have a committee that is to advise the chamber and the city commission on expenditure of TGT funds. And they're the ones that set the request, not the chamber. So it comes through the chamber, but the board basically is a rubber stamp on that committee's request. And that committee is made up of hotel, restaurant, attractions, kind of the typical you would expect on a tourism board. And we had a lengthy discussion, not this year as much as last year, about maintaining the 60%, because there's been an unwritten rule that predated me, certainly predated Marcia, that 60% of the TGT was allocated to the CVB. Historically, years ago, and Commissioner McCullough probably remembers this, it used to be 100% to the CVB, and over time, some of that has been peeled off for other projects, and those are worthy projects, and we've obviously made it work in that circumstances. We made it work during COVID when we got cut 50%, and basically lost $1 million over 2 years during COVID, and we figured that out too. So we understand that you all have to make decisions. The recommendation on the budget comes from the CVB committee that is a contractual obligation that we have with you all. So I just also wanted to remind her. And so we will take back anything that you all say to that committee, which meets December 4th, and Commissioner McCullough sits on that committee representing you all.
So I think when when we look at the increases, we got kind of specific with downtown and Aggieville. I would like to see similar specifics from CVB and the chamber in general. Just kind of like, I know, Marcia had mentioned more marketing, but like kind of what type of marketing, and then kind of what do you expect to get out of that? So it kind of does tie in with the metrics, but adding on to what you were talking about, I would like to see those metrics to be kind of more targeted at variables that you have the most control over. I know you don't control a lot of the variables, but things like net migration, that's really hard for the chamber to say,
Sure.
We affected that just because of the broader economic environment. But things like jobs created, average wage of jobs, things like that, I think those are really great. I also want to ask if you have metrics that you've been tracking so that we can kind of have a baseline for maybe even just 2024, and then next year we'll be able to.
So every metric that we gave to you all for this, we will have reported to you at the end of the year for 24.
Okay.
So we'll have a baseline of 24 in all those metrics. And you're right. So there's things like net migration that we don't have control over, but they're important things for us as a community to track.
Sure.
Right? And so we want to also, because we feel like we're your contractual agency on those kind of things, we want to make sure that those are things that you all know when you're making your decisions going forward. And so we think it's important to report.
Yeah.
But yes, we'll have baselines for every one of those items, and we're working on that spreadsheet. If you know Stacy Kohlmeyer, who's our chairman next year, she is a spreadsheet freak. Actually kind of makes me real uncomfortable with all that, but we will have spreadsheets on all that and provide that to you to whatever degree you want that information. I do want to clarify too, the economic development funding, we do spell out exactly what we're spending the money for. That's a little bit different than the CVB, because CVB is 100% funded
Right.
by TGT, whereas economic development is about 30% funded through city. The rest of that is funded through private sources. So we're very specific on the economic development, what the city funds are being spent for.
Okay.
Jason, would it be appropriate, I think you sort of alluded to this afternoon, to have representation from one or two of the commissioners?
Not only is it appropriate, we'd love it, for sure, and as well as Danielle, if she would be willing as a trained economist, we would love to have her expertise on that as well, and Jason's got so much expertise in this as well, so yeah, that would be great.
I would like to put as an evaluation scientist, I'd like to put my name forward for that. Peter, would you be interested?
Yeah.
Do you think you'll have the time to be able to do? I don't imagine it'd be more than a couple of meetings, but.
Yeah, it shouldn't take.
Probably. They are during the day though, usually, right?
We can do it whenever you want.
Well,
Commissioner
yeah, I can I can try to be flexible. So yeah, I mean, if I can make it, I'd like to be involved. Sure.
Is it all right with the other commissioners that we volunteer and voluntold? So I guess what I would suggest for this part of our discussion is that we express our appreciation for the preparation of this list of indicators. Certainly, Marcia, I know that you've reported on many of these in your quarterly presentations. And then let's move forward with setting some benchmarks for the future. Do we want that to be part of the 2025 contract?
I do want to point out, if we are looking at, which I am relating funding to these metrics, I think it has to be outcome driven, not process driven. So when I look at it, I'm like reporting on that, knowing how somebody's getting there, I think is helpful in gathering support. But when we look at it, it's outcome focused. I'll give an example for economic development. I think that's jobs and businesses. And so we look at what is the target number of jobs? And those are, I would hate to, we can't do that in a vacuum. That's probably a multi-year approach. I want to say that we can't always expect big
Some good
things
years,
in
some
one
bad
year.
years.
Right.
Yep.
So I think if we're looking at, in my opinion, it's how many jobs, how many businesses do we want to have? How close did they get to the target? And that's where we're looking at funding. For CVB, I'm at number of room nights. I think that's important rather than just dollar amounts, because if room rates are going up, that doesn't necessarily mean number of people coming to town are the same. So I look at, I would put the CVB on a sliding scale, to be honest, is if they hit their target, they get 60%. If they get more, or, have more room nights, they get more or less. That's where I'm at from an outcome-focused perspective, and that's kind of how I view it.
And I think a lot of these indicators are outcome indicators, so, but we can certainly keep that in mind.
I'd agree with that, but I think what Peter said too is specifics that go with it. Like if we're, having a strategy, are we targeting athletic events, but say our room nights go up because we got other conventions? It's like, well, but this is what we were focusing on, versus just a shotgun. Anything that goes up, we consider it a great, outcome. Well, it is. It's, we want to know the strategy is kind of in sync.
Yeah, and it is still kind of like when we look at the numbers from last year and this year, when we compare like the events since we did include K.S.A. sporting events, it does skew things, right? So that's kind of tough to look at, and
I mean, it does, but that's the reality of how it is. And so, like, if we do have a 6-game year, that's a different kind of work that CVB has to do to try to make that up.
Yeah.
And then when we have a 7-game, I'm not going to say it's easier because there's other work. It's just a different work, and that's just the reality of what it is, which is where results and outcomes, to me, are the priority.
Yeah, no,
And those numbers can be adjusted from year to year. It's not that there's constantly going to be a single trajectory over time.
Absolutely, and I think we have to take a look at where we're at as a community, where we want to be as a community, because it doesn't mean we're going to skyrocket. We may be, being level sometimes in jobs right now. It's going to go in different ways. I think we just have to work through those, establish what those outcomes need to be. Like I said, these are probably multi-year approaches.
Yeah.
Karen, you've been trying to say something.
Yeah,
Oh, I'm
that's
sorry.
okay. I'm just here. I know, I thought way back when, we talked a little bit about the concern with the parking structure, and some of those dollars were gonna come out of TGT along with the elevator. I mean, we've got that building falling down on our ears, sort of. Jason?
I'm for that.
What?
I said I'm for that.
Yeah, well, I just, we are tight this year, very tight, to create enough income to get taxed, $270,000 in taxes. We'd have to have about $3 million more coming in and people staying. Now, I understand where Jamie's coming from, but I kind of think $1.4 million is adequate to try and bring people into our community. And, we can send out more brochures, there's just so many people and so many hotel rooms and so many conventions throughout Kansas, and we can nab as many as we want. And say what you will, we're going to Ireland next year, so that's one less football game and 60,000 people flying around in Manhattan.
On the other hand, we did just open the Museum of Art and
We
Light.
did, and that's wonderful, and, but we're asking everybody to cut back, and then we're saying we're gonna increase, some of these, 50% or 19%.
And that was really kind of my my intent for asking for a more detailed request for these additional funds.
Measurable outcomes.
And what is your strategy with these extra funds? And please, if somebody disagrees with me, feel free to speak up. But I don't think that's unreasonable.
Let me just answer it real quick, because it isn't unreasonable. It's just not been the way it's historically
Sure.
been done, right? Historically, it's been, we make our request in the summer, you all tell us what our budget is for the year, and then we come back to you in December and say, this is what we're spending the money on for next year.
Yeah.
If we need to change that, I think everybody is open to that change. I don't
Yeah,
think there's any issues with that.
Unfortunately, we do have kind of some unhistorical financial positions.
I understand that completely.
Yeah.
Commissioners, I would just respectfully ask, I don't want to get too lost in the conversation about the performance measures. We are still needing direction on some of these other ones, the Aggieville Business District as well as DMI. And we only have 2 commission meetings left before the end of the year and before we have to enter into these contracts. So while we're not asking for specific action this evening, we are needing some direction, and I can certainly think that we can, hear the direction that we want to have some specific details, and that we want to have some additional conversations about these performance metrics. But just want to remind you all that we will. Our next commission meeting is December 3rd, and that one does have a fairly lengthy agenda on it with some very complex topics. And so if we do push this to December 17th, we would need action on December 17th on how you all would like to move forward with these funding options.
So I'm willing to budge. We're willing to do something in the middle with this money?
Yeah. Gina, could you come up and remind us, since your request is the largest absolute increase, can you refresh for us your proposal for using those funds?
Sure. So the reason that I have a 100% increase which would be a total of $183,000, is for competitive wage for staff, for getting a website, for the Houston Street construction project, which we have to take care of as far as flower baskets, Christmas decor, flag program. That's $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 right there. So it is in wages, it's in our street beautification, it's in safety, it's in cleanliness, website. And right now, I'm losing staff because I can't afford to keep them. I mean, it's just how it is.
Which means what to you losing staff? What does that mean?
Well, I mean, you're looking at staff right here. So we're going to cut 16 events. And if we don't get the funding, we're going to cut 16 events. And those are some near and dear and treasured events that we've been doing for years, but we can't do them anymore because it's just me and maybe one other person. And it's too hard. It's not sustainable. I mean, we have a very small budget for what we do, 31 events, and advocating for our small businesses. Retail and restaurant recruitment, everything that we do is just on basically 2 people right now, and has been for years. And it's not sustainable. We're so big. We're basically 100% occupied. We have such demands from patrons and visitors and business owners and property owners that it's really hard to keep up the pace with our current staffing levels. And you're going to see it in no street decor on Houston Street until we get the funding for it. You're going to see it in a direct half of the events are going to go away, and we'll be down to just minimal staff.
Is there any opportunity to get money from the existing businesses? Does it mean it supports them to drive their business?
They pay into the BID.
Right, but I mean to take that up to a higher level? Because that's what we hear from other folks too. I mean, it's benefiting these businesses. Can they contribute more?
Are you asking, should I go to the businesses and say, will you contribute more money to this district? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah.
Or is it the membership dues?
Yeah. Yeah.
Through the BID, do you mean? Like increased BID fees?
Yes.
So we just went through a 10%, Rena? 10% and then another 3?
So it was initially 10, then 3, and then 3.
Yep. So we've raised them 10%, 3%, 3%.
Right, and this is 100%.
The BID fees? I'm sorry, I guess I'm not following your,
No, they have increased, but you're asking for a 100% increase. They've increased the 10, and the 3.
I do want to point out, I think Gina's asked for the same amount for how many years?
the $93,000 has been for 5 years straight. And the reason that it went from 75 to 93 is because I needed to add a staff person, and so it was all salary. But I really do want to answer your question. I'm not really sure I understand it. The BID is not a part of this number. It's,
Yeah, John's asking if you can charge them more to cover the $93,000.
I mean, ethically, I don't
That's a
feel like
common
that's-
question you get from just people out there when we give money to business districts is, well, can people in the business districts contribute more to their own prosperity?
They-
I think it's a relevant question and that someone would ask that.
It's a relevant question. I think the fact that we just gave them a 10% increase 3 years ago, and then another 3%, and then another 3% increase, they are paying. They're absolutely paying into the district.
Yeah, John, and, full disclosure, I am married to a business owner in the downtown business improvement district. It's, what is your fee, $150? Or what's your annual fee? Is it per square footage?
It's based on several things. It's
Okay.
square footage, where you're located in the district, core or periphery,
Okay.
retail or non-retail.
But that's not cheap. And then on top of that, they also, many of them pay into the chamber to be members of that.
Which I don't have anything to do with.
I understand. But it adds up for those businesses, and many of those businesses operate on very small margins.
Yes.
Any of the food service business owners who are worth anything, they will tell you almost to the penny what they're paying for labor. It is very tight. So, they also pay property taxes, and
Well, it's all
generate-
there. I just think it's
Yeah.
a question, legitimate question to
It's a
ask. How
legitimate-
much is subsidized versus how much are they going to contribute to their own prosperity?
It's a legitimate question, but let me also remind you that unlike any other city in Kansas that I know of, and you know that I visit them every year, our sister cities, we are the only downtown organization that requests money to pay for beautification on the public right-of-way, like picking up trash. We have a maintenance person. That's handled in every other city by the city. We have a contract with a landscaping company, Rothwell, that we pay for our flower baskets, the maintenance, the Christmas lights, all of that stuff. That's generally 99.9% of the time in all other communities paid for by the city. And so when we make these requests, 25% of that request is going back to making the city of Manhattan's downtown sidewalks and streets beautiful, safe, and clean.
I think Gina's request is reasonable to me. I don't know if we want to take these one at a time. I think DMI will be good stewards of those resources and return that through. That's one avenue that we're going to take to increase our revenues by making those changes or implementing those things. I also think we really can't afford to lose the sales tax revenue that it generates, which I think we would, we risk that by losing events. Those are sales tax generators. So, nobody's surprised. I'm fully in support of DMI receiving the full request.
Yeah, I agree with Jamie, especially, when we look at the museum now that's open, we want to create an inviting corridor that leads people downtown, because it would be just as easy for them to drive into town, go to the museum, and then leave, and maybe stop at the Sonic and at the Wamego exit, or they can leave the museum, walk down the street and eat at one of our restaurants. So, we want to create that corridor, but that stuff does cost money. So
Which you've already committed so much to.
Right.
So we need to finish it.
Yeah, and you're talking about the construction on Houston and 4th Street. Yeah, and you're right. That is going to be a very nice, inviting crosswalk, very pedestrian friendly. So
I do want to mention one little thing, though, is we've already missed the deadline for flower baskets for Houston Street because I didn't know what our funding was, so I had no way to order them. So I want you to know that there are no flower baskets on Houston Street next year because the deadline is October 1st. And normally, every other year, I've always known what our funding was. We meet for our budgets. We've already done that, so there will not be flower baskets.
Okay.
Full disclosure. Missed the deadline.
it's all right.
Additional discussion?
I just think, let's, I think the 2025 request, I'm okay going with it. But we need, again, just with the targeted metrics of what we're going to use that money for, so that next year we can look at those things and show what was done with that money and hopefully what our return on that investment was, because I do see it as an investment as well.
And do we make that mandatory for all 5 of those entities?
So I'm personally struggling a little bit with the Art Center and Wolf House. Nobody's here from either of those, is that correct? I think and maybe they just weren't aware. I do feel like they have not been involved outside of the one meeting. Granted, this might be a completely different process than what it's went through each year. It feels like they feel like they're guaranteed that versus Gina, Marcia, and Dennis have been advocating and trying to work through these. Dennis is at most of the meetings. So I feel a little different about the Art Center and the Wolf House, and I also am not sure on how we would gauge performance metrics for those 2 entities. I mean, we could look at visits to the, I just, that one's different. When I'm looking at DMI and ABA, I'm looking at sales tax revenue, looking at occupancy, different things. Is it possible for those to be, if we're going to talk with the chamber and have a group to discuss that, can we have a couple of us have a side group?
Arts Center, they should be collecting sales tax on their ticket sales. So that could be a pretty easy, how many tickets did you sell? And how much sales tax did you collect? I think that's a pretty easy thing, and we should be able to have that historically too, to be able to gauge that. So.
I think the Wolf House is so minor when we're looking at $267,000 for the CBB, that's just, again, it's very difficult to raise money for basic things like painting the outside or something like that. And no, they aren't here. But it is a historic building that we need to kind of keep up, and it'd be nice if we could give them 15 so they could do something with the other 2 historic buildings, which are right next to them, but I'm not suggesting that. could we possibly compromise with CVB and give them $1.5 million, and that would be an increase, and then we could see if those metrics, we'd still have a little bit to put on the side for carryover. Should we need to bail out the parking structure, or, I don't know, the roof on something downtown, or?
I mean, I think if that's a fair compromise, if that's something that you need to feel comfortable.
Yeah.
I'd support that.
All right, I think you have your guidance. We do not need to take a motion on this action.
Just so I'm clear, CVB is the only one you lowered to 1.5, everybody else at the 25 application.
I personally would probably be okay with keeping the art center steady at 43.7. It's not much, but
I agree. Dennis, listen, I'm a frequenter of Aggieville, but that sounds bad. I just like to go to Takalucha. I do think we might need to hear more from you on that increase. I don't know that we have to hear that today. I don't know how everyone feels.
I'd support keeping the Arts Center flat.
Dennis, do you want to come up and remind us about your purpose for the increase?
Okay, well, as far as our increased budgeted request, ours, I guess, is a little different. That's putting the cart before the horse on us, is that what we've done, we haven't changed since 2018 as far as the request. But I can tell you there's a lot of things that we may have been doing in 2018, 2019, 2020 that we're not doing in 2023 and 2024 because we didn't have the money for it. Like as downtown was mentioning, flower baskets, we killed those off 2 years ago down in Aggieville, which was it was a nice piece, but it was like, okay, we don't have the budget for certain things. Here's where we're going to start, and for us, our, hopefully, we're a 52 weeks out of the year business district, but we're obviously bigger in the spring and the fall, and versus the summer and the dead of winter. But for us, when you do the flower baskets, they don't come out until Mother's Day, and they're gone. They're down and about the time that the school starts. So we just said, okay, well, cut that out of the budget. So that for us, that's probably not a thing for us. What ours was is we as we discussed this with my board, we chose that and said that here's the things we're looking at, and this is not from a staffing standpoint, it's me, and and there's no increase in it for me. What we've got is we have one maintenance person to try who's down there 5 nights a week to empty trash and clean up things. Casey's listening. I don't want to think he's getting a big raise, but he's been paid the same thing since 2018, and we do depend quite a bit on actually people who are coming to us for community service, and they kind of help out on other areas that we can do things. But for us, it is a matter of we've got to we need to keep this entertainment district as viable as possible, and we know what's coming up ahead. Is we've had kind of a little lull in redevelopment, but we know that we're going to be back to redevelopment again April of 25 on 12th Street from Memorial down to Laramie, which means we're going to restrict traffic. We're going to put some businesses under some real strain, and so we've been talking about. That we have not had, we haven't had the budget, but we haven't had a regular promotion and advertising campaign. We just kind of do it piece by piece, when there's an event. And sometimes for us, events like this, last weekend we had the U.S. Army drill team that was, just kind of dropped out of the sky on us. And, normally, I can tell you, in anytime I can tell you, here's the events we're going to do this next year. But then we get events like this that, we had about 2 weeks notice. Do you want to do this? Can you do this? And yeah, then you've got to turn over everything, every card you got to try to figure out how we can put those things on. But it's a blessing for us to do it. But we would like to have a regular advertising promotion campaign, to kind of really, talk about Aggieville on a regular basis. We've gone to real efforts this year to increase safety and security. If you've been down there, I don't think anybody's been down there at midnight on Friday night lately. John, okay, well, I mean, John has, of course, but we've worked out something with RCPD, and basically they restricted traffic starting on Fridays and Saturday nights. Started that when school started, and even though that has been effective and has helped us on a safety and security, the way it's been done is the police officers have come down, and as they've cut off through traffic, they've used it with police cars with their lights on, which is a detriment to the district. And we're I think we've kind of gotten past that maybe this last week in working with Raleigh County Police Department, and we're talking about other ways of doing things like that. But we know we have to have the safety and security. But what we want to do is keep these businesses viable and do everything we can to bring people down there. And before John asks whether we can just up the BID, I'll save you the trouble. I guess the answer would be just like as Peter had mentioned, this is not the time to go raising BID on businesses that are going to be under stress with redevelopment going on. And for sure, what we know on redevelopment is starting in April, we're going to get a traffic situation, and we're going to get these businesses on 12th Street. Yeah, but it will impact everybody, but they're going to go under stress. Here in the next couple of weeks, you're going to hear again from Back Nine Development, and hopefully we're going to get private development underway again at the first part of this in 2025, and which will also encumber the whole district. We know what it's going to be like, the after fact of getting 12th Street redeveloped and getting these things done. That would be really great for us. But we've got to be alive and viable until those things happen. So those are the things for us. So specifically, what do we have I don't have a promotion plan, and here's the budget for it. What we need to see is what is available to us, and then I'm willing to, quarterly, monthly, whatever you want for me to come up and tell you what we're spending it on and how we're doing it. I'd be happy to do that. But as far as we don't have it budgeted because we don't have the money yet.
Dennis, this kind of worries me that we're asking everybody for measurable outcomes, and you really haven't defined why you need 50% more. You've given us some suggestions. Perhaps next year when you have those issues, it might be, what worries me about Aggieville is all the empty office space. And it seems to me rather than...
I'm sorry, what office space are you talking about?
What?
What office space are you talking about?
All the business, all the empty
Retail space, is that what you're saying?
Space. No, I don't.
The Chin
I don't know what people are
property.
gonna use it for, but empty space. When
You mean the Chen property?
What?
The new the green building.
The green building, the parking structure, there's office space there. There's, there's just a lot of, I walked over to Blue Stem Bistro the other day, and I was amazed how many empty spots there were in some of the new buildings.
Okay, well, yeah, as far as the Chen property, the green that's over there, they're down to, I think, under 1,000 square feet left. Yeah, he's got a couple more leases who have signed, who are going in. I know there's I won't say out loud because they're not ready to publicize what they've got, but his space is going to be should be as close to full as possible.
Then your BID will improve.
Yeah, and that will help, but if they're not in it in January, it'll be another year before we pick that up, because that's you have to have a signed lease on January 1st to get a BID bill. The space in the parking garage has got nothing. Sorry, I mean it affects us, but that's a city-owned building. We have nothing. We have no idea what's going to happen there. That's not that don't know whether that's going to be retail. Have no idea what that will be. So that's really an undeveloped piece. So yeah, I don't. We do have two places. Right there if you come from that direction, between Radina's and right next to that, they are, they're currently paying BID. There is a tenant in there, but they are trying to sublease that out. A couple other places that look empty, they are leased. They are just waiting for development, and so they are paying BID.
Thank you, Dennis.
Okay.
Commissioners, do we want to reiterate what our guidance is for staff? So what I'm hearing is keeping the Manhattan Arts Center steady, not allowing that increase, and reducing Convention and Visitors Bureau request to 1.5 million.
Can I ask a question? Did we notify Art Center, Wolf House, ABA in downtown Manhattan that they need to have, I'm not trying to pick on you, Jared. Did you tell them to be here?
They weren't, Manhattan Arts Center and Wolf House were not specifically asked to come here tonight, primarily because during your budget discussions this summer, you focused solely on ABA downtown and the CVB on metrics and funding.
And did we ask ABA or DMI to prepare anything for tonight?
No.
Anything? Okay.
No. They've been aware and following it because of the discussion that happened this summer, and they have meetings with city staff, so they were aware. But no, Manhattan Arts Center and the Wolf House were not made aware of this and told to come and present or anything, and neither were the other agencies. The CVB was aware because of the metrics discussion that you all have been having related to performance measures.
The director of the Arts Center was aware that this would be on the agenda tonight.
Okay, I mean, I feel better having those discussions if knowing that. I do think there's been some confusion. I'll be honest, I was a little caught off guard. It was a big agenda tonight on everything we were going to be discussing. But sorry, Susan, go ahead and continue with your.
So what I'm hearing is accepting the requests for the Aggieville Business Association, Downtown Manhattan, Wolf House, and as they are, maintaining the Art Center at their 2024 allocation, and slightly increasing CVB to 1.5 million.
I'm struggling with ABA. I don't think there's a concrete enough plan of attack to generate more sales tax revenue. That may have been just how we ask or what we ask people to provide for us. But I'll move forward in that way if others are in support.
I am concerned with the additional construction that's going to be going on next year. that is going to throw a spanner in the works in terms of other activities in Aggieville. It is going to put tremendous pressure on businesses that have just endured several years of pressure. And I think Dennis's point about when you do have an opportunity for something like I can't remember what it's called, the Army, the drill team, to not have sufficient flexibility in your budget to be able to capture something like that. And besides not giving the guy who's been working since 2018 without a raise as he keeps Aggieville clean, I'm okay.
I'll back down, Susan.
Not trying to crack a whip, I'm just, those are my.
No,
that's
I appreciate all your
my
input.
rationale.
I'm just happy we got some reduction.
All right, so.
Yes,
are
I
we-
have my direction. Thank you.
Okay. We have one more presentation this evening. I can't say I will apologize to the consultant. I appreciate your patience. Thank you all for your assistance tonight. So we do have an update on the East Manhattan Gateway Plan. I understand that you were able to make this presentation yesterday to the Pot County Commission. So thank you for that, and we look forward to hearing from you. Can you do it in about 10 minutes?
No worries.
Joke.
Just use the arrows to advance forward. So I just want to introduce Jay Dimma. He's with Stantec. We've been working for about a year now on this process. We were at the Board of County Commissioner meeting yesterday, and Jay has a timeline. He can walk through some of the events while he's here. And he did promise he would keep this brief, and if there's any additional information that y'all would like, we're happy to provide that to you. We have some feedback that we received today from our Community Advisory Committee that we'll be incorporating into materials, so there is a little bit of new information that'll come at a later date. So, go ahead.
Great. All right. Well, thank you all, and I'm very understanding of the arduous night it's been. So I will, in the interest of understanding that, kind of move things at somewhat brisk pace, but I'm happy to stick around and answer any and all questions at the end of presentation if folks are so inclined. So very, very simple overview, and then discussion of the timeline, and then I'll talk a little bit about what's been done. And then I'll probably try to focus most of the time on where we're at right now in the process, so you can get an understanding of some of the work that we're currently focused on right now, and then talk about where we're going next after where we're at the point. So, project overview. So, in a real basic sense, the East Manhattan Gateway Plan is really a guiding vision. And it's focused on the McCall Triangle and the US 24 corridor. And when I say guiding vision, this is really about thinking 20 plus years in the future. This is not a 5-year plan. This is a long-range 20-year plus plan, acknowledging some of the intrinsic and fundamental things that probably need to be addressed and changed in order for these areas to sort of change and accommodate sort of future growth and development. So it's a long-range vision. And just to kind of remind you, because I think I've updated you previously. Last time I've been around in February, I think we were up here giving a quick update of things. So the planning area that we're looking at here, this is the southwest corner of Pottawatomie County. In the extreme lower left of the corners, the McCall Triangle, and then the US 24 corridor going eastward out to Hopkins Creek Road. So the dashed green area is the area that we're studying as part of the planning work, but the dashed yellow area is the area that we're really more focusing on for purposes of thinking about what are the types of improvements, what are the types of changes that really need to be sort of planned for. And the reason why we're focusing on that corridor is that is the primary commercial corridor. The areas north of that corridor is the Green Valley area, where there's a lot of residential development that's going on, and it's been happening and sort of taking a more quicker pace. And because of all that additional housing development that's happening up there, that has a direct impact on the commercial operations and other functionings of the US 24 corridor. So The change that we want to look for and plan for is in the yellow dash, but we really want to understand and know the impact of that residential development. So,
Jay,
yes.
I'm sorry, can I interrupt for just a second? Can you point out, Commissioners, I'm not sure if you're aware that it was announced today that Eck Motor Company is going to be purchasing land on Highway 24 for a very large auto sales place. So can you, it's on the corner of Excel and Highway 24?
Yeah, the southeast corner, right, yep, yeah, great.
So some of that development is continuing even as we're looking at this?
Yeah.
So, excuse me.
No, thank you. That's a great kind of real-time sort of definition. So we have a sense of the overall project and its project scope geographically, the timeline. So we are kind of broke this process down into 4 primary phases of work. We began roughly a year ago and evaluated existing conditions in the winter months, and then starting in the spring, we began to kind of build some ideas around plan concepts, and we've been refining those plan concepts, and that's what I'm going to present tonight for you to see where we're at. Along that process, there's a number of different ways in which we've been engaging the community. We've been doing this through a community advisory committee that's been established. There's also updates to you folks, and then several important rounds of community engagement, of which yesterday and today sort of represents our 3rd major round of community engagement that we've been doing. Now we're going to be moving into the final phase of the process, and I'll talk a little bit more of that at the end of the presentation, what's involved in those steps. But now you can get a sense of, yes, we are beyond the halfway point. We're probably close to 3/4 of the way through the process. So what's been done? So just to give you very, very high level overview, this is just a simple demonstration of some of the existing conditions analysis that we did early on in the project so we could understand what's the conditions there today, looking at a variety of different characteristics around, what are the land uses, what is the infrastructure, whether it's stormwater, wastewater, what's the transportation dynamics. So there's a lot of different things we ended up looking at to give ourselves a really good, clear picture of what's there today. That's been summarized in a roughly 40-page sort of document that covers all these things, and that's been put on the project's website, on the city's website. So just to let you know, that's all been documented. In addition to that, we looked at demographic and market analysis around the population growth trends, how's the real estate dynamics shifting and changing in the region, what's our income dynamics. So in these 2 examples here on this is just a small subset of a lot of different data we gathered. That, again, was summarized in a report that is on the website for the project that folks can access and download. So I just want to be able to let you know that these were, the background information we're doing. And the community engagement work that we've been doing throughout this process. So as I mentioned before, the Community Advisory Committee, today was the 4th time we've met with that group. And now we're going to transition, and we thank them for their hard work. And now we're going to transition out of sort of working with them and getting into this final phase. We've done 3 community-wide open houses. We've done several open houses focused on the business community. In addition to that, focus groups. So we had sort of roundtable groups of 8 to 10 people helping us that came from backgrounds in residential development, commercial development, subset of business owners, social service agencies. And we would complement this along the way with, particularly like large property owners, one-on-one interviews, and we've met with the Chamber of Commerce board meeting before, and then using the city's website as other ways to capture comments from the community as well. And as Stephanie mentioned, the Community Advisory Committee, we had a meeting earlier today, and they've weighed in on this, and their comments with some of the other comments we've been learning today and yesterday are going to fold into some of these concepts that I'm going to go over. One thing, I'm just going to quick anecdote, and I have this graphic here, just to speak to the importance of community engagement. As a consultant team coming in and working with the communities here to understand what our important issues to folks. It was such kind of a remarkable, we would have never known about this issue of flies along the US 24 corridor if we didn't come here and actually talk to people and engage in the community, right? And it's pretty interesting just to kind of learn the impact of these things. And so we dug a little bit deeper to understand, well, where are the hatcheries and just how many, chicks are in these things and what is that influence doing, and a little bit about how far flies tend to move and go around and kind of impact the area to see these things. And so it's just a quick anecdote to kind of bring home just the importance and the impact and the influence that we've been having by talking with lots of different entities and people involved in this.
So how far will a fly travel?
So roughly about 3 to 5% will make it about 2 miles from where they hatch from. And then, then it's like 60 to 75% will go out to about a mile, so
that's far enough.
But it's far enough. It's far enough. So a lot of the engagement work that we've been doing, we did back in the spring months, distill this into a vision statement that really tried to, in a high level, kind of capture the economic role of this area in the region moving forward and its importance, and the fact that it needs to focus on improving the environments for people who live there, work there, the visitors there, and address issues related to sort of transportation and access and availability of job opportunities and so forth. So we had this broad vision statement. These were supported with a series of supporting goals. And what these vision statement and goals have helped us do is we've been looking at the different types of recommended changes. These are things that we turn back to throughout the process to say, okay, is this idea something that is supported here and relevant based on these vision and goals? We look back to these as a way to kind of keep guiding us throughout the process. And these were all formed through comments and inputs here that we've learned from folks throughout the whole process. So that North Star of a vision statement with goals has been totally formulated by what we've been hearing from people and what they've prioritized and have said is important to them and within the community. And here's just some direct quotes. And again, all of this type of information that's been gathered to date has also been summarized in a series of sort of engagement notes that have been, again, put on the website. So you get to see actually the things that people have been saying. So where are we? Okay, I'm going to break this into sort of two components just because the corridor is long and then there's distinct areas in it. So I'm going to focus first on the McCall Triangle. And what we've been doing in approaching this is, first of all, thinking in terms of sort of a framework. Like, how can we think, first of all, about access and mobility in the framework around that? So we've been suggesting and recommending ways which, over time, as businesses get sold and bought, properties get changed over, new development continues to happen. There's opportunities where we see of maybe realigning or adding new street connections along with parks and trail connections throughout the whole triangle to try to improve mobility within the triangle and connection to the neighborhoods adjacent to the triangle as well. In particular, we think about, for example, in the southwest of this area, moving into the Manhattan Town Center, and the downtown is so close by that addressing the needs to improve the Tuttle Creek Boulevard, the crossings, the intersections, people get over to the triangle, and that might represent a lot of opportunity to revitalize and change sort of the quality and nature of some of that area in particular. So thinking about that whole idea then of actually thinking about land use, we've then kind of also pulled out a framework saying that let's think about the ways in which these uses today, but how they might evolve in the future. And so on the southern area in this pink shade, we talked about this idea of South Sarbor becoming this kind of, hey, maybe if we can connect this with across the Tuttle Creek Boulevard in a better way, change some of those road alignments. We can make things more of a pleasant environment. And you can see on the left-hand side some imagery that might represent sort of the look and feel of those changes. Along the McCall Road corridor, there's been a lot of recent investment in fast food and so forth. So there's not a lot of near-term expectation for change, but we would see opportunities to improve safety, definitely crossing that road, allowing more pedestrian ability, maybe just generally addressing some of the streetscape to just enhance the experience through trees and other things that just make it more pleasant. And then the industrial areas that are there, we see those as flexing more over in the future. There's buildings here that, you know, may become obsolete at some point in the time, and to think about how we could have uses that might come in there, like distilleries often like to go into these districts because, you know, the buildings are big enough and the rents are low enough, but then they kind of have a component to them where there's a come and go, there's people there that are experiencing the spaces, and to allow that sort of flexibility. Shifting now to go eastward, and thinking about now the US 24 corridor east of the Big Blue River. And again, thinking and starting with this idea of, okay, let's think about a framework around access and mobility. And in this instance, one of the key drivers here is, well, first and foremost, what I want to make sure is that we know that KDOT is going to be analyzing and doing a pretty deep analysis of this corridor in 2025, beginning of 2025. We see our role at this point in the process is providing some, you know, guidance and informing a lot of the detailed decisions that they're going to need to make about access management and closing off particular access points. But in this instance, what we want to be able to do is go, well, we think in sort of a big, you know, the big move here, as they say, would be probably trying to get more frontage and or backage road systems in this area to help kind of navigate and sort of sift and sort local traffic, people who live in the area that want to shop in those businesses close by, and not putting more pressure on then 24, which is facilitating the movement east-west of traffic through Pottawatomie County and into Riley County. So a backage and a frontage road system, complemented again by a system of some multi-use paths, bikes, pedestrians, you know, people can accommodate wheelchairs, though that can be complemented in this area, as well as some other more naturalized trail systems to help people get maybe to some of the amenities that are along the river, or for example, what we see in here is the little area with the Lake Elbow Creek area, to connect areas through those areas as well. We're also thinking about ways in which to maybe introduce, you know, some amenities, parks and open space into some of these areas, and considering those options, which kind of comes up a little bit in this graphic here, which is now thinking and going, we've looked at access and mobility. Now let's look at maybe potential future land use and development. Along the corridor itself, we have an area that says corridor mixed use, which by and large, it's kind of the existing conditions. There's a mixture of things in there. But what we would like to see at key intersections is maybe a little bit more attention given to concentrating like and complementary uses to create more of a nodal function, so that there could be you know, more ability for particularly people who are looking for neighborhood goods and services that don't want to necessarily go all the way into the McCall Triangle or further westward. There's a spot in place where that can work and function well. We've also wanted to recognize and identify sort of the expansion of the Green Valley industrial area eastward on the north side of US 24 to accommodate more future opportunities for employment growth. The Scorpius kind of project is one example of that. We see this as also being real critical because of the McCall Triangle right now actually has the region's predominant share of industrial uses and buildings in that area, and there's not a lot of room left. We've got one spec building that's being built right now. There's not too much more room for other space to accommodate any potential future industrial growth or like commercial growth. And it just seems obvious that if any entity wanted to, you know, was growing in that area and needed to expand, but there wasn't the room there, this seems a real logical place to think about further east along 24 is ability to accommodate that. And then when thinking about that and being cognizant of the residential areas to the north that are growing and continuing to expand likewise, we see that if there's an industrial district or a strong commercial district that does form north of 24, that there would be an idea of thinking of how to sort of transition those uses between single-family detached homes with these commercial uses, and that there's opportunities to maybe introduce different forms of residential housing. Again, you've heard a lot tonight about duplexes and townhomes and things of that nature that could serve as a bit of a transition. All right, I think that's going to summarize sort of, and I apologize, I was going very, very quickly through that, but it gets you through the high-level concepts that we're thinking about in those two areas. And now where we're going as we transition into this last phase, there's some couple other key things that we're going to be doing as consultants working with the city and other stakeholders. And that is, one is, we know it's critical to understand the potential fiscal impact of this type of planning. So we are going through an exercise where we are going to be able to look at maybe a couple different growth scenarios and evaluate them based on high-level cost estimates of the recommended infrastructure. Like when we show maps of new frontage roads and backage roads and new roads connecting through the McCall Triangle, new streetscape that might need to be done, how much of that is that, and what would be the estimated cost of that? And then at the same time, try to look at the projected levels and amounts of development that might occur over a long sort of 20 to 30 year period, and assess that based on the taxable value of that type of development, and try to compare what are those public infrastructure costs with what are the potential taxable elements along associated with new development, right? And get, is there a gap? Is there not a gap? And so we want to be able to bring that level of information to this process. We do also want to prepare sort of a set of design guidelines that would be really useful and instructive for particularly developers and other property owners, that when they think about changing their property and land, that's another thing to give them a sense of what the vision is for this area, so that when they come to the city asking perhaps for a zoning change or some regulatory related to permit issues or whatever the case may be, there's a clear vision in place that they understand and what to expect. And we also wanted to ultimately create a couple, kind of images that, they're intended to sort of convey the spirit of the plan so that people can feel how it's being aspirational. And then ultimately, once we work our ways through that, there is a process here to then think about developing an implementation strategy and it is a way to identify priorities and what to tackle first and how to do that. And also provide what we refer to as sometimes as a resource map that goes along with that sort of strategy, like where are the opportunities to fund some of the investment, both through sort of taxation and or grant dollars that might be available for some of this as well. And then this all hopefully gets wrapped up with a very usable document, and that ultimately gets adopted. So that is one final thing I want to say here, is that part of what we're doing right now will definitely necessitate a lot of technical questions that people have, like, can you do this? Does this physically work? How will this impact this? And what we want to say is that in some cases we can answer those questions, but in others, that's going to require sort of follow-up work that's of a more detailed and more technical nature, and that might be related to, the extension of services and working through, how fire is provided and law enforcement and how this interacts with school districts, or it's floodplain management or stormwater management, or all these are really important things that, yes, there will be these, really challenging technical questions, but we want to pave the table or set the table to be able to allow subsequent studies to have a really strong foundation to address some of those issues. So there we go. How did I do? Did I stay within my 10 minutes?
I always have questions. First, I hope you've noticed that the Pot County Commission is expanding to 5 commissioners, 1st of January, and there will be 4 new commissioners there. So it would behoove you to touch bases with them as quickly as possible.
I will note that at the BOCC meeting yesterday, there were 3 of the new commissioners there, and then
good.
2, one of the same, and then an additional one made it to our open house last night. So they've all seen the same presentation. And last night at the open house, we had some really good conversations with the 2 that attended.
Yeah.
Great, that's good to know. You know, we're working so hard to have more housing in Riley County and Manhattan. And the land in Pot County is much more conducive to more inexpensive housing because of this, you know, stratas and that kind of thing. So do you go into it all weighing the merits of this city in another county with other taxation? I mean, I don't know. What, you know, we've talked about this for forever, and the costs, you know, the overhead costs, just to have a fire station is millions of dollars. I just don't know how.
Well, the thing is too, we keep island annexing everything that brings in tax revenue. So if we ever make a decision to annex residential, it's gonna be a big cost.
Yeah.
Plus, they won't be able to incorporate because we took all their tax base.
Yeah. And we wouldn't just be able to annex a couple houses. So, no, I just mean, the fiscal note on that would be interesting because it's definitely less expensive to develop over there.
Well, I think we did, and Jason could probably correct, no, when Scorpius, when it was Scorpion, when we did that whole analysis, I think we ran the analysis, we were to annex everything. And I think it kind of broke even, but then if you only had annexed Scorpius, if you go back to get the residential, it's a big up cost because in a sense you've already taken the revenue.
Yeah. Well, and I know that, that most of those houses were not built to code,
Right.
and the streets aren't to code.
And water
there's no
lines.
water, and, yeah. On the other hand, we do supply water and sewer to them, right? So we could legally do that. If it's so. I don't want the.
Of course,
anyone to
the
think-
Riley County Commission has some issues the more we expand into.
Yeah, yeah, no, there's issues everywhere, but I just think as long as we're doing this study, we could get some facts on that.
Yeah, to the degree of being able to fully understand the questions around whether you annex areas that have, you know, single-family homes or not, I think I think there's been a previous study that there was some analysis of that. We probably won't go that far with it, but to the degree that we want to look at this whole question of, you know, what sort of costs are associated with, you know, new infrastructure that might be needed, and then what sort of taxable, you know, development that might happen in the areas that we're looking at with change. So we're not looking at and planning for in this plan, you know where new single family is going to go. Pot County already did a plan for that Green Valley area, but you know, we see that, you know, maybe in that parts of the McCall Triangle could end up having some types of housing introduced in there that get mixed in with the commercial. We see some of those nodes along the US 24 corridor, you know, just off of, and maybe adjacent to some of the backage or frontage roads. Maybe there are some types of new housing that's at a denser level. And, you know, to your point, what you're hinting at, I think, is that detached single-family housing usually gets subsidized by other other types of development. But when it comes to multifamily housing, that's not always necessarily the case. Sometimes that actually can be subsidized other commercial. You know, you get bigger bang for your buck, as I say.
I didn't necessarily mean it should be single, but there might be some areas that would really lend themselves to less expensive multiplex kind of,
Yeah.
you know, and that would get us a lot more bang for our buck than going, you know, infill in Manhattan.
Yeah, and that would be one thing to consider along that US 24 corridor, indeed.
Jay, this is a really picky point. When you get into doing some of your renderings for what that area might look like.
Yes.
I just recently had an opportunity to visit Henderson, Utah, which it was extremely confusing because the entire area has been developed with exactly the same architecture throughout.
Yeah.
And it wasn't very attractive. So if you can keep that in mind while you're
Yep.
doing
Yep.
Thank you very much for your presentation. We appreciate your staying with us as long as you did.
Yeah.
Before we adjourn, we need to,
Do you want to ask for public comment on that?
hello, public comment? You're sure? Yes, okay. All right, seeing no public comment.
I move approval of the agenda,
No.
I mean, of the minutes.
The minutes of November 5th.
Second.
Okay. Commissioner McCullough has made a motion to approve the minutes of the November 5th, 2024 meeting of the city, and Commissioner Minton has seconded. Can you take the roll, please?
Yes?
Commissioner Opel,
Yes.
Commissioner Motta,
Yes.
Commissioner Mitten,
Yes.
Mayor Adamchuk.
Yes,
Motion carries 5-0.
thank you. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
Move to adjourn the November 19th City Commission meeting.
Second.
Commissioner Opelt has made the motion to adjourn. Commissioner Minton has seconded. One last roll call, please.
Commissioner Opel,
Yes.
Commissioner Motta,
Yes.
Commissioner Mitten,
Yes.
Mayor Adamchuk.
Yes.
Commissioner McCullough.
Yep.
Thank you all very much for some good discussions tonight, and thank you each who made compromises from their original positions. It's appreciated.